If you're ready to rest, you're in the right place. Close your eyes, relax your body, and drift into a slower time. You can also let us know in the comments where in the world you currently are and what time it is for you. In the grand auditorium of the ancient world, Greek mythology was the rock concert everyone wanted tickets to. Long before anyone thought about stealing their neighbor's Netflix password, Greek myths were the binge-worthy sagas passed around like the ultimate oral tradition mixtape. We're talking about tales so epic that if they were a modern series, they'd have more seasons than The Simpsons and more plot twists than Game of Thrones. Way back in the 8th century BCE, a guy named Homer was penning stories that would make today's blockbuster writers weep into their screens. His epics, like the Iliad and the Odyssey, were the must-see, must-hear tales of the time. People weren't just lounging around with their tunics up, they were hanging on every word that painted gods and heroes larger than life. But let's not kid ourselves. These myths weren't just spun from the creative yarn of one man sitting under an olive tree. Oh no, this was a collective effort, a tapestry woven from the threads of culture, tradition, and, surprise, surprise, political agendas. Greek mythology, in essence, was the ancient world's version of a PR campaign, with Zeus as its dubious poster boy. Zeus, the king of the gods, had more affairs than a scandal-ridden Hollywood A-lister, and yet he was revered and feared. Why? Because myths served as the scriptural backbone for societal norms, religious practices, and the all-important justification of power. Just like politicians today, the ancient Greek elite knew the power of a good story. These myths helped maintain social order, offer explanations for the natural world, and reinforce the authority of those in charge. Let's not forget, Greece wasn't a country back then but a collection of city-states, each with its own spin on the tales. It was a bit like having multiple directors creating their own cuts of a blockbuster movie. What might be a heroic tale of Athena in Athens could be played out as something entirely different in Sparta. These oral traditions were the lifeblood of cultural identity, carrying with them the values and lessons that each society held dear. Homer's epics, for instance, began as oral stories, passed down from bard to bard, growing and evolving over generations. They were like the ultimate game of telephone, with each retelling adding a little more flair, a little more drama. By the time Homer got around to writing them down, these stories were already the ancient equivalent of a hit series with a dedicated fan base. So, why did these myths matter so much? Well, think about it. In a world without the internet, electricity, or even a decent paper trail, stories were the glue that held society together. They were the moral compass, the historical record, and the entertainment all rolled into one. When you're living in a time where your morning commute might be interrupted by a marauding band of invaders or a particularly angry god, having a good story to lean on is pretty reassuring. Now, let's talk about the socio-political factors that shaped these stories. Ancient Greece was a theatre of constant change, wars, alliances, betrayals, the occasional plague, you name it. The myths had to adapt to remain relevant. They were like the best kind of improv, reflecting the current political climate and the power struggles of the day. Take the Trojan War, for example. Sure, it's an epic love story on the surface, but beneath it all, it's a tale of political intrigue, alliances, and the catastrophic consequences of one bad decision. Kind of like a mythological version of a very intense soap opera. The gods themselves were often reflections of the humans who worshipped them, embodying their virtues and vices. Zeus might have been the head honcho atop Mount Olympus, but he was also a cautionary tale about the pitfalls of unchecked power. His escapades and temper tantrums were a reflection of leadership gone awry, a divine parallel to the very real kings and rulers of the time who had to be kept in check by their citizens. And let's not gloss over the economic angle. These myths didn't just float around like divine daydreams. They were part of a vibrant oral tradition that supported a whole economy of storytellers, performers, and later, playwrights and artists. Imagine trying to make a living as a bard, pitching your version of a myth to a crowd, hoping to earn enough for a loaf of bread. These stories weren't just entertainment, they were livelihoods, shaping and being shaped by the economic realities of the day. In the end, Greek mythology was more than just a collection of fanciful tales. It was a complex tapestry of human experience, woven with the threads of power, politics, and the timeless quest for understanding. So next time you hear about Zeus and his antics, remember, it's not just about the thunderbolts and the philandering. It's about the stories we tell ourselves to make sense of the world, and that, my friends, is a tale as old as time itself. So, when Zeus and his celestial crew weren't busy meddling in mortal affairs, the folks down on Earth were weaving these myths into the very fabric of their daily lives. Let's dive into the gritty realities of ancient Greece that turned myth-making into a full-blown industry and a tool for maintaining the status quo. First up, the economics. In a world where a drachma could buy you a decent meal, or a cheap amphora of wine if you were feeling fancy, myths were more than just stories. They were economic powerhouses. Picture Athens in the 5th century BCE, when the city was a buzzing hub of trade, politics, and culture. The Parthenon, that iconic temple dedicated to Athena, was constructed during this golden age. It wasn't just a religious symbol, it was the ancient equivalent of a blockbuster hit, pulling in tourists and their drachmas from all over the Mediterranean. The construction of the Parthenon wasn't cheap. Estimates suggest it cost around 469 silver talents, which, to put it in perspective, could pay an entire Athenian fleet for a year. When you're spending that kind of money, you're not just building a temple, you're making a statement. This wasn't just about honoring a deity. Oh no. It was about flexing political muscles and reinforcing Athens' status as the creme de la creme of the Greek world. Pericles, the Athenian statesman, spearheaded this grand project under the guise of religious devotion, but let's not kid ourselves. His real agenda was to demonstrate Athens' power and sophistication. The Parthenon served as a visual reminder of Athens' dominance, a marble-clad middle finger to rivals like Sparta. The role of myths in reinforcing social hierarchies is another juicy layer in our ancient Greek lasagna. These tales weren't just bedtime stories. They were the social media of the day, spreading political propaganda and solidifying social norms faster than a tweet storm. Take the myth of Pandora, the first woman, crafted by the gods, and famously unleashing all the world's evils from her jar. This story wasn't just a cautionary tale. It was a tool that reinforced gender roles, subtly suggesting that women, despite their divine origins, were the root of all worldly troubles. Sound familiar? It's the ancient precursor to blaming Eve for that whole apple incident. Meanwhile, the myth of the Minotaur lurking in the labyrinth was more than just a spooky tale to tell around the fire. It symbolized the political tensions between Athens and Crete. According to the myth, Athens had to send tributes to Crete to be devoured by the beast. A reminder of the subjugation and tribute Athens once paid to the Minoan civilization. But when Theseus, the Athenian hero, slayed the Minotaur, it wasn't just a victory over a monster. It was a narrative of Athenian triumph over their oppressors, a story that played to the crowd like the greatest underdog victory ever told. The intertwining of myth and politics was like the ultimate ancient soap opera, each city-state adding its own dramatic flair. While the stories of gods and heroes entertained, they also educated, subtly reinforcing the idea that the gods themselves endorsed the ruling class. It was a divine endorsement that kings and politicians leveraged like an ancient seal of approval from Mount Olympus itself. Speaking of endorsements, let's not forget the priests. These mythological gatekeepers wielded immense influence, interpreting the will of the gods and guiding the populace. Temples became the epicenter of economic activity, drawing pilgrims and their offerings. This wasn't just about religious devotion, it was about economic strategy. The Temple of Apollo at Delphi, home of the famous oracle, was an ancient Wall Street, where city-states consulted for divine advice on matters from war to agriculture. The priests were the brokers, and every prophecy carried weight and, often, a hefty fee. Religious festivals were another economic boon, drawing crowds and boosting local markets. The Panathenaic festival in Athens, held in honor of Athena, was part marathon, part religious devotion, and part economic stimulus. With athletic competitions, sacrifices, and feasts, it was a multifaceted spectacle that strengthened social bonds and filled the city's coffers. Yet, while myths built and bolstered, they also divided. The Greek pantheon was a reflection of the city-states themselves, each with their own quirks, rivalries, and agendas. Athens' dedication to Athena was not just religious but political, a deliberate choice that emphasized their values of wisdom and warfare prowess. Sparta, on the other hand, with its militaristic society, revered Ares and Apollo, reflecting their own values of strength and discipline. In the end, Greek myth-making was the ultimate balancing act, a blend of storytelling, economics, and political strategy. It was a system as complex as the stories themselves, with every tale serving multiple purposes. As the Greeks worshipped, debated, and built, they were not just honoring their gods, they were crafting the very narrative of their civilization, one myth at a time. And that, my friends, is a tale worthy of the gods themselves. And just like that, Greek mythology wasn't just the stuff of bedtime stories, it was the very air they breathed. From the moment a Greek citizen opened their eyes to the sunlit skies of the Aegean, to the time they closed them under a canopy of stars, myths were the drumbeat of daily life. Imagine strolling through the bustling agora of Athens, where tales of gods and heroes were as common as the olive vendors hawking their wares. Myths weren't just narratives, they were cultural currency, shaping everything from art to social norms. Let's kick things off with art, that ancient Instagram feed of Greek society. The influence of mythology on Greek art is as undeniable as Zeus's penchant for meddlesome escapades. Artists painted tales of divine drama on everything from amphorae to temple walls. Take the Parthenon frieze, for instance. This architectural marvel didn't just showcase pretty figures, it was a visual manifesto of Athenian identity. With over 160 meters of sculpted high relief, this masterpiece celebrated the Panathenaic festival, a grandiose event honoring Athena. It was a shout-out to their patron goddess, a visual narrative of civic pride and religious devotion. And if you think they missed a chance to flaunt their superiority, think again. This was Athens flexing its cultural muscles, a marble-clad declaration of "we're the best" for all to see. But wait, there's more. Greek theatre was another stage where myths took centre stage, quite literally. In cities like Athens, theatre wasn't just entertainment, it was a civic duty. The annual Dionysia festival, dedicated to Dionysus, the god of wine and revelry, was a theatrical bonanza featuring tragedies and comedies that filled the city with dramatic flair. Picture this. A massive amphitheatre packed with 15,000 Athenians, all eagerly awaiting the latest works by playwrights like Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. These weren't just stories of gods and mortals, they were reflections on morality, politics, and the human condition. Tragedies like Oedipus Rex and Medea didn't just entertain, they challenged audiences to grapple with questions of fate, justice, and the gods' whims. Speaking of whims, let's not forget the real-life implications of a pantheon more capricious than a reality TV star. Imagine living in a world where divine intervention was an ever-present threat, like an unpredictable neighbor with a penchant for loud parties. The Greeks built temples and offered sacrifices not just out of piety, but out of a pragmatic desire to keep the gods in their corner. These sacred spaces weren't just places of worship, they were insurance policies against divine wrath. After all, when your crops depend on the whims of Demeter or your voyage on the mood of Poseidon, a little appeasement goes a long way. Daily life was a constant navigation of myth and reality. From birth to death, the Greeks were steeped in rituals that reflected their mythological beliefs. Naming a child, for instance, was an event laced with divine significance. Names like Achilles or Helen weren't just chosen for their melodic ring, they were a nod to illustrious figures from myth, a hope that their child might inherit a sliver of their legendary prowess or beauty. Marriage, too, was infused with mythological undertones. Ceremonies often invoked Hera, the goddess of marriage, whose own union with Zeus was the stuff of epic drama, a divine soap opera featuring jealousy, infidelity, and power plays. It's a wonder anyone dared to invoke her at all, given her tempestuous reputation. But this was the norm, the gods were the ultimate role models, despite their questionable conduct. They were larger-than-life figures whose stories offered moral guidance, albeit wrapped in a layer of celestial chaos. Yet, for all the divine escapades, the Greeks understood the gods' stories as allegories, cautionary tales warning against hubris and folly. The myth of Icarus, who flew too close to the sun, wasn't just a thrilling narrative, it was a lesson in moderation, a reminder that overreaching ambition could lead to a spectacular downfall. Similarly, the tale of King Midas, whose golden touch became a curse, was a stark warning about the perils of greed. In the grand tapestry of Greek life, myths were the threads that wove together art, theatre, and daily rituals. They were the lenses through which the Greeks viewed the world, offering a blend of entertainment and existential reflection. And while the gods might have been as temperamental as a Greek summer storm, their stories provided a framework for understanding the chaos of the human condition. But let's not romanticize it too much. Believing in gods who could unleash a tempest on a whim or turn you into a spider for boasting about your weaving skills was a double-edged sword. It meant living with a sense of cosmic unpredictability, where divine favour was as fleeting as a summer breeze. For the Greeks, life was a constant dance with fate, with myths serving as both the music and the cautionary tale. The influence of these myths resonated far beyond the borders of ancient Greece, laying the groundwork for Western culture. From Renaissance art to modern literature, the echoes of these ancient tales continue to reverberate. But that's a story for another day. For now, let's revel in the fact that these myths were more than just stories. They were a lens through which the Greeks interpreted their world, a world as vibrant and complex as the myths themselves. And as we continue our journey through the mythological landscape, remember, every tale has its roots in the real world, and every character, no matter how divine, reflects the timeless struggles and triumphs of humanity. So, as we leave the Greeks to their myths and their marble temples, let's ponder the enduring legacy of these ancient stories and how they continue to shape our understanding of the world today. Stay tuned, because the next act in this epic saga is just around the corner, and trust me, it's going to be a showstopper. As we delve deeper into the labyrinthine world of Greek mythology, it's time to roll up our sleeves and separate the chaff from the wheat, or in this case, myth from reality. The Greeks spun tales as effortlessly as spiders weave webs, but how do historians today untangle these stories to uncover the truth? Spoiler alert, a lot of dusty books, old pottery, and some seriously sweaty archaeological digs are involved. First, let's talk about the evidence game. Historians and archaeologists are like the detective duo you'd want solving ancient mysteries. They've been sifting through ruins and reading between the lines of faded scrolls for centuries. Take the city of Troy, for instance. Long considered a mythological mirage, akin to Atlantis or that sock lost in the laundry, it was famously discovered by Heinrich Schliemann in the 1870s. He unearthed layers of settlements at Hisarlik in Turkey, revealing a real city that may have inspired Homer's epic tales of the Trojan War. And while Schliemann's methods were about as subtle as a bull in a china shop, he might have blown up a few things in his zeal, his work opened the floodgates for archaeological exploration. The truth is, ancient texts like the Iliad and the Odyssey are more than just literary masterpieces, they're historical treasure maps. They guide archaeologists to potential sites, providing clues buried within their verses. For example, descriptions of geographic features or city layouts can lead researchers to specific locations. It's like a real-life national treasure, minus Nicolas Cage and the dramatic heist music. But archaeology isn't the only tool in the historian's kit. Ancient texts themselves are scrutinized with the intensity of a detective examining a crime scene. Linguists and historians study these works to identify anachronisms or stylistic changes that suggest multiple authors or versions over time. The Greek myths, as it turns out, are like a collaborative Wikipedia page, constantly edited and updated by generations of storytellers. It's not just about what's written down, it's also about what's left unsaid. For instance, the conspicuous absence of any mention of major events or societal changes in mythological texts can be just as telling as their inclusion. When the myths gloss over inconvenient truths, historians must look elsewhere for context. Cue the ancient philosophers, the original influences of the Greek world. These thinkers weren't just pondering the meaning of life while lounging in togas, they were shaping societal values and questioning the status quo with all the subtlety of a Socratic slap upside the head. Take Plato, for example. He was less about retelling myths and more about dissecting them like a surgeon with a scalpel of logic. In works like The Republic, Plato used allegories, such as the famous cave, to critique the very myths that shaped Greek society. He questioned the moral lessons these stories imparted, challenging the notion that the gods were models of virtue. Plato, ever the philosopher, was more concerned with the truth behind the shadows on the cave wall. Then there's Aristotle, who wasn't content to simply philosophize in abstract terms. He wanted to categorize everything, from plants to politics, with the precision of a taxonomist on a caffeine high. His empirical approach to knowledge and his willingness to question established beliefs helped lay the groundwork for separating myth from history. He wasn't just rearranging mental furniture, he was building a new house altogether. But myths weren't all smoke and mirrors. They were educational tools, the ancient Greek version of a TED Talk, albeit with more thunderbolts and fewer PowerPoint slides. In a time when formal education was a luxury, these stories were the primary means of imparting cultural values. They taught lessons about bravery, cunning, and the dangers of hubris. The cautionary tale of Icarus flying too close to the sun was a metaphorical slap on the wrist, warning against over-ambition. The philosopher's role in education was akin to that of today's influencers, shaping thoughts and values with their discourses. Socrates, for instance, was the original provocateur, questioning everything to the point of annoyance. His method of asking probing questions, often leading his pupils to discover their own ignorance, was a revolutionary approach to learning. Like a seasoned talk show host, Socrates knew how to keep an audience engaged, even if it sometimes ended with him drinking hemlock. The long-term impact of these myths, aided and abetted by philosophical inquiry, is undeniable. They laid the foundation for Western literature, philosophy, and even some aspects of law and governance. The Romans, never ones to let a good idea go to waste, adopted and adapted Greek myths, embedding them into their own culture like a recycled plot in a blockbuster sequel. Fast forward a couple of millennia, and you'll find these stories echoing through Shakespeare's plays, Renaissance art, and even modern cinema. Yet, for all their enduring appeal, Greek myths are a double-edged sword. They offer timeless tales of heroism and folly, but they also perpetuate outdated stereotypes. The myth of Pandora, for example, has long been criticized for its misogynistic undertones, painting women as the root of all evil. It's a narrative as old as time, yet one that continues to be challenged and reinterpreted in contemporary discourse. In fact, the reinterpretation of these myths is part of their magic. They're like an ancient form of fan fiction, constantly evolving to reflect the values and concerns of each generation. Whether it's a feminist retelling of Medusa's story or a modern adaptation of the Odyssey, these myths remain relevant by adapting to the cultural zeitgeist. As we continue to unravel the threads of Greek mythology, it's clear that these stories are more than just relics of a bygone era. They're living, breathing narratives that continue to shape our understanding of the world. And while historians and archaeologists keep digging for truths buried beneath layers of time, these myths remind us of the power of storytelling to transcend history and touch the very core of the human experience. So, as the curtain falls on this act of our historical saga, remember that the myths we've inherited are more than just fantastical tales. They're a testament to the creative spirit of humanity, a reminder that even in the face of uncertainty, we've always sought to make sense of the chaos through the stories we tell. Stay tuned, because the next chapter of this epic journey promises to be just as enlightening and perhaps a little less mythical. As we stand on the shoulders of these mythological giants, peering into the vibrant tapestry of tales spun across millennia, we're reminded that the real power of Greek myths isn't just in their ancient origins, but in their persistent footprints throughout modern culture. These stories have not only survived, they've thrived, evolving into the cultural juggernauts we see today. Take language, for instance. Ever heard someone described as having an Achilles heel? Thank the Greeks for that linguistic gem. It's one of those phrases that slipped seamlessly from the pages of Homer into everyday conversation, embodying the idea that even the strongest among us have vulnerabilities. Or consider the word tantalize, which traces its roots back to Tantalus, a mythological king doomed to eternal thirst and hunger, forever reaching for food and water just out of grasp. When you're tempted by that last slice of cake that's just out of reach, Tantalus is your guy. These linguistic nods are more than mere expressions. They're proof of how deeply myths have seeped into our vernacular, giving us a shared vocabulary to articulate the complexities of human experience. Now, let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture pop culture. Greek mythology has become a metaphorical goldmine for Hollywood, Broadway, and beyond. From the silver screen to the stage, these stories have been reimagined, reinterpreted, and sometimes outright reinvented. Take the 1981 classic Clash of the Titans and its 2010 remake. Both films took liberties with the original myths, blending them with cinematic spectacle to create blockbusters that, while perhaps not winning any awards for historical accuracy, certainly captured the public's imagination. And it's not just about high-octane action flicks. Greek myths have also inspired more thoughtful works, like Stephen Fry's Mythos series or Madeline Miller's Circe, both of which delve into the emotional depths and motivations of these timeless characters. These modern retellings peel back the layers of ancient storytelling, revealing the raw humanity beneath the divine veneer. They remind us that, for all their godly antics, these myths are fundamentally about people, flawed, complicated, and remarkably relatable. Let's not forget the commercial side of things. Greek mythology has become a branding powerhouse, with gods and heroes adorning everything from sportswear to car logos. Nike, the goddess of victory, lends her name to one of the world's most recognizable brands, while the luxury car company Maserati sports a trident, a nod to Poseidon, god of the sea. These symbols are more than marketing gimmicks. They're a testament to the enduring allure of mythological imagery, a way to infuse products with a sense of timeless power and prestige. But why, you ask, do these ancient tales continue to resonate so profoundly? Perhaps it's because they tap into universal themes that transcend time, culture, and geography. They explore the human condition in all its messy glory, from the pursuit of love and power to the struggle against fate. In a world that often feels as chaotic as Zeus's family reunions, these stories offer both an escape and a mirror, reflecting our own triumphs and failures. The adaptability of these myths is part of their magic. They've been twisted and turned to fit the narratives of each generation, like a cosmic Rubik's Cube that never quite settles into one form. This flexibility allows them to remain relevant, continually engaging new audiences with fresh interpretations. Whether it's a feminist retelling of Medusa's transformation from victim to villain, or a modern take on the trials of Hercules, these stories are constantly reborn, each iteration offering a new lens through which to view the world. However, let's not get too swept up in the romance of it all. For all their allure, Greek myths also carry the baggage of their time-outdated gender roles, hero worship, and a penchant for divine retribution that could make the most dramatic reality TV show look tame. They reflect a world where might often made right, and where the whims of the gods could alter the course of history on a capricious whim. Therein lies the duality of these myths. They are both timeless and time-bound, offering wisdom and warning in equal measure. They remind us that while the gods might have been larger-than-life figures, they were also deeply flawed, just like the people who created them. And perhaps that's the most enduring lesson of all, that even in a world ruled by divine power, it's the human stories that truly resonate. So, as we close the book on this mythological journey, let's carry forward the lessons and legacies of these ancient tales. Whether they're teaching us about the dangers of hubris or the power of perseverance, Greek myths offer a treasure trove of insights into the human psyche. They're a reminder that, for all our technological advancements, the fundamental questions of existence remain unchanged. Why do we seek power? How do we confront our fears? What does it mean to be truly heroic? These are the questions that have haunted humanity since time immemorial, and they're the same questions that Greek myths continue to explore in all their complexity. They're stories that refuse to fade into the annals of history, instead rising like phoenixes, ready to inspire and challenge each new generation. In the end, perhaps the greatest myth of all is that these stories are relics of the past, for in truth they are very much alive, shaping our world with every retelling and proving that some tales are indeed timeless. The sun is barely peeking over the horizon, casting its first golden light across the North African landscape. You're up with the dawn, but don't expect a leisurely start. No meditation mat here. You're greeted by the low grumbles of your camels, those grumpy yet essential companions. Welcome to the 5th century life of a Berber trader, where your day begins not with a serene sunrise, but with a head count of your 4-legged fleet. Camels are the rock stars of your operation. They're the original off-road vehicles, the 4x4s of the desert, if you will. Let's get this straight. Without them, you're toast. These guys can go up to 100 miles in a single day, carrying hefty loads that would make any human backbone wince. Each camel can lug around 600 pounds of goods, and trust me, that's a lot of dates and salt. Yes, salt. Forget gold and glitter for a second. Salt is the real MVP in these parts. It's not just a seasoning, it's currency, it's life. Your livelihood hinges on these creatures, so you spend your morning making sure they're fed, watered, and not in a particularly foul mood. A cranky camel is the last thing you need when you're about to trek across one of the harshest environments on Earth. Speaking of harsh, let's talk geography. The Sahara isn't just a desert, it's a personality test. It's an ocean of sand dunes, some towering up to 500 feet high. Sure, it sounds romantic to the uninitiated, but this landscape is more about survival than sunsets. Your route is dictated by the whims of this environment, by the shifting sands and the relentless sun. Temperatures can swing from a scorching 100 degrees Fahrenheit by day to a chilling 40 at night. You've got to pack smart, like Marie Kondo smart. Every ounce counts because every extra pound you load onto your camel is another pound you might regret when you're knee-deep in sand. Packing is an art form, a skill honed by generations. You've got your bales of goods, salt, of course, maybe some precious gold dust or exotic spices if you're lucky. And don't forget the essentials for your survival: water, dried meat, dates. You'd be surprised how much you can fit into a camel's saddlebag when you're motivated by the threat of dehydration. You meticulously balance the load, because a lopsided camel is an unhappy camel, and an unhappy camel is a stubborn stop in your journey. Now, about those myths. Everybody loves the romantic notion of the noble trader navigating the endless dunes. But let's bust that bubble, shall we? This isn't a leisurely stroll, this is a high-stakes operation. You're not just trading goods, you're trading news, gossip, even political secrets. Every stop at an oasis or a caravanserai is a chance to hear the whispers of political machinations from far-off lands. The Vandals, those charming invaders who've recently settled in North Africa, are just one of the many political players you need to keep tabs on. You're not just a trader, you're an information broker, a walking, talking newsletter in a time when paper is a luxury. And speaking of luxury, let's talk about your caravan. It's not just camels and cargo, it's a mobile community. You've got your fellow traders, maybe a few mercenaries for protection, and the odd scholar trying to hitch a ride. This isn't a solo gig, it's a team sport. You rely on each other to navigate the ever-changing landscape and to fend off the occasional bandit. Yes, bandits. It's not just the desert that's out to get you, but human nature as well. As you prepare to set off, there's a sense of anticipation mixed with the ever-present edge of anxiety. Will the journey be profitable? Will the weather hold? Will your camels decide today's the day they want to stage a rebellion? These are the questions that swirl in your mind as you take that first step into the sand, the grains crunching underfoot, the horizon stretching out endlessly before you. That's your morning. No emails, no conference calls, just the open road, or rather, the open sand. You're off to see the world, one dusty mile at a time. With a deep breath, you begin your trek across this sprawling sandscape where every step is a gamble with Mother Nature's mood swings. Trade routes in 5th century North Africa? More like a treasure map drawn by someone who had too much wine. These paths are as complex as they are crucial. They're the arteries of commerce pumping goods and culture through the region. As you and your caravan forge ahead, it's time to delve into the gritty details that make this trade tick. First up, the economics. Picture this: salt, shimmering like a mirage, is worth its weight in gold, literally. In some places, a pound of salt could swap hands for the same amount as a pound of gold. Why? Because salt isn't just for flavor, it's a preservative, a necessity in an age where refrigerators are a mere glint in the future's eye. You're not just hauling salt, you're hauling the key to survival. Then there's gold itself, glinting temptingly from the depths of mines in West Africa. These nuggets are the ultimate prize, the stuff of legends and the foundation of empires. This precious metal fuels an insatiable demand from the Byzantine Empire, where the emperor is eager to fill his coffers. The Byzantine influence stretches like a shadow across the Mediterranean, dictating trade policies and sometimes even the routes themselves. They may be miles away, but their hand is felt in every transaction, every negotiation. But let's not forget the bling factor luxury goods. Roman glass, with its kaleidoscope of colours, is the must-have item for anyone with a taste for the finer things. This isn't just glass, it's art. a status symbol that tells the world you've made it. A single piece can fetch a fortune, especially in the courts of African kings or the bustling markets of the Byzantine territories. You're not just a trader, you're a purveyor of prestige, bringing a touch of elegance to the harsh desert life. Yet, the trade routes are more than just economic networks. They're cultural crossroads. You're not just swapping goods. You're exchanging stories, ideas, and innovations. The ties with sub-Saharan Africa are particularly significant. From these lands come not only gold, but also ivory, hides, and exotic spices that spice up life in the northern markets. These connections are lifelines, binding disparate cultures through shared commerce and mutual need. But let's hit pause on the romanticism for a second. This isn't a smooth operation devoid of complications. Every ounce of cargo, every mile travelled, is a negotiation with fate. Bandits lurk in the shadows, the human embodiment of supply chain disruptions, always ready to relieve you of your hard-earned goods. You've got to be as sharp as the swords your mercenaries wield, always one step ahead, always vigilant. The socio-political landscape is a minefield in its own right. The Vandals, fresh off their conquest of Carthage, are the new kids on the block, and they're not exactly the friendly neighbours you'd invite over for a barbecue. Navigating these waters, sands, requires diplomatic finesse. Alliances must be forged and maintained, rivals outmaneuvered, and every move calculated with the precision of a chess grandmaster. One wrong step, and your caravan could be caught in the crossfire of a power struggle that has nothing to do with you but everything to do with your route. And then there's the weather. The Sahara is unforgiving, a stern teacher that doesn't tolerate mistakes. Temperatures can make a mockery of your well-laid plans, the sun baking you by day, the cold biting at night. Sandstorms can whip up out of nowhere, turning the world into a swirling vortex of blinding grit. Your survival kit? Instinct, experience, and a dash of luck. Yet, amid the chaos and the challenges, there's a rhythm to this life. The sound of camel hooves crunching through the sand, the murmur of traders swapping stories, the smell of spices mingling with the desert air. It's a symphony of survival, a dance with the elements that defines the life of a Berber trader. As the day wears on, you keep moving forward, step by step, mile by mile. The horizon stretches ahead, a line that beckons with the promise of profit and the allure of adventure. You're not just a trader, you're a traveller, a bridge between worlds, a link in the chain of history that stretches from the past into the future. The road, or the dusty path as it were, awaits, with all its challenges and rewards, its risks and riches. This is your world, a place where the sands of time and the sands of the desert intertwine, shaping the destiny of empires and the lives of those who dare to walk its paths. And as you press on, the stories of those who have come before and those yet to come echo in your footsteps, a reminder of the eternal dance between commerce and culture, survival and success. As your caravan pushes through the shifting sands, the midday sun forces you to call a halt. It's not just about giving the camels a breather, it's about preserving your sanity and skin under that relentless fireball in the sky. So, you find a sliver of shade under a rocky outcrop, a temporary refuge from the solar onslaught. Time to break out the dates and water, the 5th century version of a power lunch. This pause offers more than just physical relief. It's a moment to reflect on the cultural tapestry that is Berber life. Now, let's unravel the myth of the noble savage, shall we? The romanticized image of a simple, noble people living in harmony with nature may sound like a cozy bedtime story, but reality has a habit of being less picturesque. The Berbers, or Amazigh as they call themselves, are a complex mosaic of tribes, each with its own identity, language, and slice of the vast North African landscape. Forget the idea of a monolithic people. This is a kaleidoscope of cultures and dialects. Language is your first clue that the Berber identity is rich and varied. The Tamazight language, with its myriad dialects, acts like a cultural glue, binding these disparate tribes while simultaneously highlighting their differences. You might hear Tarifit in one region, Tashelhit in another, and each carries the weight of centuries of tradition and adaptation. Think of it as the linguistic equivalent of a patchwork quilt, each piece unique, but all sewn together to keep you warm through the cool desert nights. But let's talk social structure. It's not all campfires and kumbaya. Tribal life is governed by codes and customs, as intricate as any Byzantine bureaucracy. Each tribe, or takbilt, is like its own mini-state, with leaders known as amgars who handle disputes, make decisions, and occasionally remind everyone that power is as fluid as the sands underfoot. It's a delicate dance of cooperation and rivalry where alliances are forged and broken with the shifting winds. Now, let's tackle the elephant, or should I say camel, in the room, the idea that these communities lived in idyllic peace, untouched by the outside world. Not quite. The Berbers are no strangers to conflict, both internal and external. Tribal skirmishes are as much a part of the landscape as the sand dunes. These aren't just petty squabbles, they're often about resources, water, grazing land, trade routes. You know, the usual suspects that have sparked human conflict since time immemorial. And then there are the external pressures. The Vandals, those pesky new neighbours who've taken a liking to Carthage, are just the latest in a long line of invaders who see North Africa as the perfect spot to set up shop. The Romans, the Byzantines, and now the Vandals, all have their eyes on the riches of the region. The Berbers, ever pragmatic, have learned to navigate this ever-changing political landscape with a blend of diplomacy and defiance. But let's not gloss over the resilience that defines these people. The Berbers have a knack for adaptation that would make Darwin proud. They're the original survivalists, using their intimate knowledge of the land to outmaneuver larger, more organized forces. When the Romans built roads, the Berbers knew the desert paths. When the Vandals stormed cities, the Berbers retreated to the mountains. This isn't just about survival. It's about thriving in the face of adversity. Of course, not all interactions with outsiders are hostile. Trade, that great unifier, has forged connections across cultures. The Berbers aren't just trading goods, they're trading ideas, stories, and innovations. This exchange has enriched their culture, weaving foreign threads into the fabric of their identity. It's a reminder that even in an age of conflict, cooperation can shine like the gold dust you're hauling in your caravan. So, as you munch on your dates and sip your water, take a moment to appreciate the complexity of Berber life. It's a world of contrasts, where tradition and adaptation coexist, where peace and conflict dance a perpetual tango. The sun will soon dip lower, signaling the time to move on, but for now, enjoy the respite and the rich tapestry of culture that surrounds you. As the shadows lengthen and the heat wanes, you muster your caravan, ready to resume the journey. There's a rhythm to this life, a cadence dictated by the sun, the sand, and the stories that have been told and retold under starry desert skies. You're not just a trader, you're a part of this age-old narrative, a thread in the intricate weave of Berber history. The road, or rather, the sand awaits, with its challenges and its promises, its risks and its rewards. Onward, to where the horizon beckons and the future unfolds, one grain of sand at a time. As the caravan lurches forward, the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky with hues that'd make a Renaissance artist weep. But let's not get too caught up in the poetry of it all. This is still the gritty business of trade. You're not just moving goods, you're shifting the very axis of regional power. Your daily grind is the beating heart of North Africa's economy, and every grain of salt, every nugget of gold you transport alters the landscape in ways that would baffle even the most astute historians of the future. Let's talk economics, shall we? The trade you've been sweating over isn't just enriching your purse, it's a financial lifeline for whole cities. Carthage, now under the stylish yet ruthless Vandals, relies on traders like you to keep its markets bustling and its coffers full. The constant flow of goods is more than mere commerce, it's the bloodstream of urban existence, dictating who eats and who starves, who prospers and who perishes. It's the original trickle-down effect, minus the political spin. And here's the kicker. You're also the unexpected emissary of cultural exchange. Every stop on your route, every dusty oasis and bustling market becomes a melting pot of ideas and influences. You're not just swapping salt for silver, you're trading stories, philosophies, even recipes. And it's not just idle chit-chat. This is the stuff that ignites revolutions, both big and small. Take ironworking, for instance. The technique might have originated in the Anatolian highlands, but it's your relentless trekking across the sands that sprinkles it like fairy dust across new territories. Your cargo isn't just physical, it's intellectual. You're inadvertently spreading the seeds of technological prowess that will one day shape empires. How's that for a side hustle? But this is no fairy tale. You're not a romanticized wanderer. You're an unwilling diplomat in a political chess game. The Vandals, those newcomers with a penchant for pillaging, are just the latest players in a long line of power-hungry rulers. Your route is a corridor of influence, a battleground where soft power is wielded with as much precision as a Vandal axe. It's politics, played out in the marketplace, where the right connection or whispered secret can tip the scales of power. And let's not ignore the agricultural practices that hitch a ride on your caravan. You're not just carrying goods, you're transplanting knowledge. Ideas about crop rotation or irrigation techniques seep into new lands, revolutionizing farming practices. It's the original agricultural revolution, one camel load at a time. You're the accidental Johnny Appleseed of the desert, scattering seeds of innovation without ever planting a single tree. But, of course, there's a darker side to this tale. Your life as a trader is a high-wire act, balanced precariously between opportunity and danger. Each transaction is a gamble, each alliance a test of trust. The political winds can shift as swiftly as a desert storm, turning allies into adversaries with little more than a change in leadership or a whispered rumor. And speaking of rumors, let's debunk a few while we're at it. The notion that these trade routes were paved with gold and good intentions? Pure fantasy. These paths were fraught with peril, from treacherous terrain to treacherous people. Bandits weren't just lurking in the shadows, they were a constant threat, an ever-present risk that added a layer of tension to every journey. This wasn't just a trade, it was a testimony to human tenacity, to the sheer will to survive and thrive in an unforgiving world. Yet, amid the chaos, there's an undeniable allure to this life. The thrill of the unknown, the promise of profit, the intoxicating blend of cultures and ideas. It all weaves a tapestry as rich and varied as the goods you carry. You're not just a cog in the economic machine, you're a vital thread in the intricate web of history, a bridge between worlds that might otherwise remain isolated and insular. As the stars begin to twinkle in the vast desert sky, you realize that your role as a trader is more than just a job, it's a legacy. You're shaping the world in ways both seen and unseen, leaving a mark that will echo through the ages. The trade routes you traverse are arteries of change, pulsing with the lifeblood of commerce and culture, politics and pragmatism. So, as you settle in for the night under a blanket of stars, take a moment to appreciate the enormity of your journey. You're not just a trader, you're a catalyst of change, a keeper of secrets, an unwitting ambassador of ideas. The road ahead is long and uncertain, but filled with the promise of discovery and the thrill of adventure. Keep your wits about you and your eyes on the horizon, for the journey continues and history awaits your next step. As you nestle under a blanket of stars, let's take a moment to zoom out from the sandy trails and zoom into the big picture, the long-term implications of your life's work. You're not just a trader, you're a linchpin in the grand tapestry of history, threading the needle of commerce through the fabric of cultures that will ripple through time. Fast forward a millennium or so, and you'll find that the legacy of these routes is as enduring as the desert sands themselves. First, let's talk about language, a living testament to the cultural exchanges you facilitated. The Berber tongues, like Tamazight, have interwoven with Arabic, French, and even Spanish over the centuries. Ever notice how the language of a place is like its DNA, carrying the markers of past interactions and influences? The linguistic patchwork in modern North Africa is a testament to the relentless cross-pollination of cultures that traders like you initiated long before globalization became a buzzword. Sure, Latin might have been the lingua franca back in your day, but the Berber dialects have displayed a tenacity that'd make a cockroach blush. They're still spoken by millions today, a stubborn reminder of a time before borders were drawn with rulers and red ink. Now, onto the economic systems. We're an early architect of what economists now call global trade networks. The caravans you led weren't just transporting salt and gold, they were paving the way for economic systems that would eventually give rise to bustling trade hubs like Marrakesh and Timbuktu. You, my friend, fast forward to the present, and these ancient routes have evolved into modern highways, bustling ports, and digital trade networks. The same spice trails that enriched the Byzantine coffers now facilitate billion-dollar industries. And the funny thing? People still lose sleep over logistics and supply chain issues, much like you did while trying to keep your camels in line. But let's not sugarcoat this. Trade wasn't just about profit, it was also about power. The Vandals, Romans, and Byzantines might be long gone, but their thirst for control has been inherited by modern nations jostling for influence over these same critical crossroads. The geopolitical machinations that once played out in the sands now unfold in boardrooms and on diplomatic stages. North Africa continues to be a chessboard where economic and political power plays out. You were the original pawn, but just look at how the board has expanded. And let's bust some myths while we're at it. The romantic notion of the lone trader as the solitary cowboy of the sands? Total fiction. You were part of a complex network, a cog in a machine that was as much about community as it was about commerce. Today, this legacy manifests in the vibrant bazaars and souks where bargaining remains an art form, passed down through generations. The romanticized image of the solitary trader has been replaced by bustling marketplaces that continue to be the heartbeats of local economies. So, while the allure of the lone adventurer captures imaginations, the reality lies in the collective endeavor. A community-driven symphony of trade that echoes through time. But let's not ignore the darker threads in this tapestry. The same routes that facilitated the exchange of goods and ideas also became conduits for less savory trades. The trans-Saharan slave trade, for instance, was a grim chapter in this story, a stark reminder that commerce has always walked hand in hand with exploitation. As much as we celebrate the vibrant cultural exchanges, it's crucial to remember that these routes also carried human cargo, a sobering testament to the complexities of trade and its moral ambiguities. Yet amid the complexities and contradictions, there's an undeniable romance to the life you've led. The open road, or sand, in your case, calls to the human spirit in a way that's both primal and profound. It's the allure of the unknown, the thrill of discovery, the promise of profit, and the ever-present challenge of survival. These are the elements that have always drawn people to the trade, and they continue to do so today, albeit with fewer camels and more shipping containers. So, as you drift off to sleep under the vast desert sky, take a moment to appreciate your place in history. You're not just a footnote in the annals of trade, you're a chapter in the story of human ingenuity, resilience, and adaptation. The sands may shift, the stars may fade, but the legacy of your journey endures, a testament to the enduring spirit of exploration and exchange that defines us all. And when you wake, remember that you're not just retracing the steps of those who came before, you're forging a path for those who will follow, one grain of sand at a time. In the beginning, when humans first decided that staring at the sky was a valid pastime, the ancient Vedic people in India were crafting something far more intricate than mere constellations. They were sculpting the backbone of what would become a vibrant tapestry of festivals. Fast forward to around 500 BCE, and these budding celebrations were already weaving their way into the economic, social, and spiritual fabric of life. Let's dive into the heart of it. Picture the Vedic people, a society whose daily bread and butter, or should I say rice and lentils, depended heavily on the whims of the natural world. Agriculture was king, and with it came a cycle of planting, growing, and harvesting that demanded attention. To keep this cycle in check, they didn't just rely on ploughing and praying. Nope, they threw in a healthy dose of partying. These festivals were not just any excuse for a good time, they were tightly linked to the agricultural calendar. Think of them as a series of ancient farmers' almanacs, but with more chanting and less paper. Now, here's where the economic magic starts to unfold. You see, these festivals weren't just spiritual gatherings, they were economic engines. The local economy got a hefty boost, as traders, craftsmen, and performers flocked to these events like hipsters to a new coffee shop. It was like Coachella, but with more cows and fewer selfies. The influx of people meant more mouths to feed, more goods to buy, and more services to offer. It was a win-win for everyone involved, from the priest who got paid in grain to the potter whose clay pots were in high demand. But let's not get too misty-eyed about this ancient marketing genius. While these festivals were indeed spectacular community block parties, they also masked a more pragmatic purpose. They were designed to ensure that people stayed within the societal lines, following the rules of the game laid out by religious and social leaders. It's a classic case of carrot and stick, dangle a festival in front of people, and they'll willingly toe the line for a chance to join in the revelry. Clever, right? Now, If you're wondering how these ancient event organizers managed to pull off such feats without the help of modern advertising, let's chat about the Vedic priests. These guys were the ultimate marketing strategists of their time, using a blend of ritual, myth, and a touch of fear to keep the masses engaged. They'd tell tales of gods who expected grand celebrations and warn of dire consequences if the people failed to deliver. It's like having a boss who insists on a company picnic every year and threatens to cut your bonuses if you don't show up with potato salad. And let's not forget the role of the stars. The celestial bodies were more than just pretty lights in the sky. They were the divine clockwork that dictated when these festivities should occur. Each festival was a cosmic appointment, marked by the movement of the sun, moon, and stars. It was astrology with a side of agriculture, and it meant that everyone from the farmer to the merchant had to pay attention to the heavenly schedule. Miss a festival date, and you might as well be missing a rent payment. These festivals were not just about celebrating the harvest or pleasing the gods. They were a communal glue, binding people together in shared experiences and collective memory. They offered a break from the drudgery of daily life while reinforcing cultural norms and values. It was like hitting the refresh button on society, ensuring that everyone was on the same page, at least for a time. So, as we tiptoe through the annals of history, let's give a nod to those ancient Vedic festival planners. They knew that a little celebration could go a long way in smoothing societal wrinkles, boosting the economy, and keeping the cosmic order in check. And if that meant throwing some of the most elaborate and economically savvy parties history has ever seen, so be it. After all, who doesn't love a good festival? All right, let's pivot from the cosmic party planners of yore to the main event on our historical dance card, Diwali. Now, if you think today's Diwali celebrations are a dazzling spectacle, you should have seen the ancient version. Picture this, a festival that practically shouted, "Bring out your lamps and let's light up the night." The origins of Diwali are as layered as a good biryani, with roots in the ancient legend of Lord Rama returning to Ayodhya after a 14-year exile. Word on the street was that the locals went full, Martha Stewart lighting rows upon rows of oil lamps to welcome him back. This was no small feat. We're talking about billions of tiny clay lamps, known as diyas, illuminating the night like some celestial disco ball. And let's not forget the fireworks, because nothing says "welcome home" like a sky full of pyrotechnics. Now, let's talk logistics. Those oil lamps didn't just fill themselves. Each diya was fueled by oil, traditionally mustard or sesame, which meant a significant demand for these commodities. In fact, the preparation for Diwali was an economic event in itself. Traders saw a spike in oil sales, lamp makers worked overtime, and the market buzzed with activity. It was like Black Friday meets the 4th of July, but with more spirituality and less consumerism. And the fireworks? You bet your bottom rupee they had those too, though not quite in the modern sense. Ancient India was a pioneer in pyrotechnics, using rudimentary gunpowder to create explosive displays that would make even a Roman candle blush. But let's ride this train a bit further down the track. The economic ripple effects of Diwali were nothing short of awe-inspiring. Traders didn't just see an upswing in business, they saw the kind of spike that could make or break a fiscal year. The demand for goods wasn't limited to just lamps and oil. You had sweets, new clothes, jewelry, the whole shebang. If you're wondering why every merchant from Patna to Pune seemed to have a spring in their step that time of year, well, there's your answer. Diwali was a bonanza wrapped in a festival, and everyone wanted a piece of the pie. Now, before you get too starry-eyed about this luminous celebration, let's dim the lights a bit for a reality check. All those oil lamps and fireworks? They weren't exactly eco-friendly. Sure, they looked beautiful and symbolized the triumph of light over darkness, but they also came with their own set of environmental baggage. The sheer volume of oil used could make even the most seasoned festival-goer pause. And the fireworks? Let's just say the ancient skies were probably a bit more smog-ridden than we like to imagine. It's a classic case of Beauty and the Beast, where the beast is the environmental toll that's conveniently glossed over in the romance of history. Speaking of beasts, let's not forget the socio-political beasts lurking in the shadows of these festivities. Diwali, like many festivals, was more than just a communal gathering. It was a stage for power plays and social maneuvering. Kings and local rulers often used these celebrations to flaunt their wealth and power. It was a bit like hosting the neighborhood's biggest block party, ensuring everyone knew who was in charge. And, As you might expect, this meant that the festival could be both a unifying experience and a divisive one. Those who could afford lavish celebrations basked in the glow, while those who couldn't were left in the shadows, literally and metaphorically. Yet, despite these realities, the allure of Diwali remains undeniable. Its luminous charm, the sense of community it fostered, and its ability to boost the economy made it an integral part of ancient Indian life. So, while we might raise an eyebrow at its environmental footprint or its role in social hierarchies, we can't help but admire the enduring legacy it has left behind. Each flicker of a diya tells a story, one that is as complex and multifaceted as the festival itself. And with that, our historical train is chugging along, leaving behind the glow of Diwali to explore what other festivals have in store. Stay tuned, because you won't want to miss the next leg of this journey through India's storied past. As we wave goodbye to the glowing allure of Diwali, let's dive headfirst into a festival that's a literal splash of colour, Holi. Known today as the festival where Instagram meets a rainbow explosion, Holi's roots are a tangled web of myth, society, and yes, a fair bit of political intrigue. If you think today's colour runs are anything new, think again. Ancient India was hosting paint parties long before it was cool, and they came with some fascinating social dynamics. Holi, in the olden days, wasn't just about dousing your neighbour in vibrant powders and hoping for the best. It was a meticulously planned social event where the caste lines, usually as rigid as overcooked spaghetti, suddenly became as wobbly as jelly. For a brief moment in time, the usual social hierarchy got tossed out like yesterday's leftovers. Whether you were a high-ranking Brahmin or a humble Shudra, everyone got drenched in the same glorious chaos. It was as if the colour itself was an equalizer, blurring the lines that usually kept people apart. But let's not get too carried away with the idea of Holi as a social utopia. Sure, the festival offered a reprieve from the rigid caste system, but it was a temporary truce at best. Picture it as the world's earliest social experiment in equality, with the understanding that once the colours faded, the old rules snapped back into place faster than you can say, caste system. And yet, for those fleeting moments, people revelled in the freedom to interact across social boundaries, sharing laughter and colours without the usual societal constraints. Holi wasn't just a social mixer, though. It had political undertones that would make any Game of Thrones plot twist seem tame. Rulers often used the festival as a chance to display their benevolence, throwing lavish celebrations that doubled as political statements. It was a classic case of bread and circuses, but with more gulal and banga cannabis-infused drink that added a certain je ne sais quoi to the festivities. The rulers knew that a happy populace was a compliant one, and what better way to ensure that than by letting them play with colours and enjoy a state-sponsored high. Of course, the economic implications of Holi weren't lost on anyone. The demand for coloured powders made from flowers, turmeric, and even minerals created a bustling trade. Merchants who specialized in these colours saw their fortunes bloom like a field of marigolds. And let's not ignore the cottage industry of sweets, because no Indian festival is complete without enough sugar to give an elephant a glucose spike. From gujias to malpuas, the sweet shops worked overtime to meet the cravings of a populace that seemed to have a bottomless pit for dessert. But peel back the layers of coloured powder and sweet indulgence, and you'll find Holi had its fair share of controversies. The festival often served as a backdrop for social tensions to bubble to the surface. What started as playful colour throwing could easily escalate into more than just friendly fire. The anonymity provided by coloured faces sometimes led to mischief, or worse, masked grievances that no amount of coloured powder could hide. It's the kind of dark humour that history serves up, where even the most joyous occasions come with a side of complexity. Then there's the mythology surrounding Holi, which is as colourful as the festival itself. One popular legend involves the demon king Hiranyakashipu, his pious son Prahalad, and the king's demon sister Holika, who was supposedly fireproof. The story goes that Holika sat in a fire with Prahlad on her lap, intending to burn him while she remained unscathed. But, in a divine twist, Prahlad survived unscathed while Holika met a fiery end. This tale of good triumphing over evil was not just a bedtime story. It was woven into the cultural fabric, serving as a moral compass and a reminder of divine justice. Now, If you're thinking this all sounds like a grand theatrical production, you'd be spot on. Holi was, and still is, a celebration of life, triumph, and the human spirit's resilience. But amidst the vibrant chaos, it's essential to remember that these festivals also served as a release valve for the pressures of everyday life in a complex society. It's the kind of nuanced story that reminds us why history is never black and white, but rather a dazzling array of colours, just like Holi. As we wrap our heads around the kaleidoscope that is Holi, let's keep our eyes peeled for the next chapter of India's festival saga. We've got more historical goodies to unravel, and trust me, they're as rich and layered as a good piece of baklava. So, stay tuned as we continue to explore the tapestry of ancient festivals and the stories they tell about the people who celebrated them. And as we brush off the last of the Holi colours, let's twirl our way into the rhythmic pulse of Navratri, a festival that's been setting the dance floor on fire for centuries. Spanning 9 nights, Navratri is like the ultimate dance marathon where spirituality meets socializing, and where your dance moves might just land you a life partner. If you think of it as the ancient version of speed dating with a divine twist, you're on the right track. Navratri, which literally translates to 9 nights, is dedicated to the worship of the Hindu goddess Durga in her various forms. It's a festival that celebrates the triumph of good over evil, much like our friend Holi, but with an added dose of dance and devotion that makes it a uniquely vibrant affair. And when I say dance, I mean the kind that would make even the most die-hard ballroom enthusiasts break a sweat. We're talking about Garba and Dandiya Ras, a pair of traditional dance forms that are as essential to Navratri as pumpkin spice is to fall. Garba, with its origins in the state of Gujarat, is a dance that involves swirling around a centrally lit lamp or an image of the goddess, symbolizing the cycle of life. The word Garba itself is derived from the Sanskrit word Garba, meaning womb, which is a nod to the festival's themes of fertility and creation. Participants dance in circular formations, clapping their hands to the rhythm of traditional music and creating a mesmerizing visual spectacle. It's the kind of scene that could easily be mistaken for a Bollywood movie set, but make no mistake, this is as real and historic as it gets. Now, let's add a bit of spice with Dandiya Ras, which takes the Garba concept and throws in sticks, literally. Dandiya involves dancers striking wooden sticks together in a synchronized fashion, creating a percussive symphony that echoes through the night. The sticks, known as dandiyas, are not just props. They represent the sword of Durga, adding a layer of martial symbolism to the dance. It's like a historical mashup of dance, devotion, and a touch of martial arts, all rolled into one. But let's talk about the real magic happening on the Navratri dance floor, the social dynamics. In a time when arranged marriages were the norm, Navratri offered a rare opportunity for young men and women to mingle in a socially acceptable setting. Picture this: a swirling mass of colourful skirts, flashing jewellery, and hopeful glances exchanged under the watchful eyes of chaperones. It was matchmaking with a beat, where the rhythm of the doll set the pace for budding romances. If it sounds like the most elaborate singles mixer in history, that's because it was. However, it wasn't just about finding love. Navratri was also a platform for displaying social status and wealth. The more elaborate your attire and jewellery, the higher your standing in society. It was a visual feast where the rich and powerful flaunted their fortunes, while the less affluent made do with simpler garb. It's a classic case of social peacocking, where appearances were everything, and the dance floor was the stage on which fortunes were displayed and alliances forged. Of course, not everyone was dancing for love or status. For many, Navratri was a deeply spiritual experience. The 9 nights are divided into sets of 3, each dedicated to different aspects of the goddess, her power, her wealth, and her wisdom. Devotees fast, pray, and perform rituals to honor these divine qualities, seeking blessings for themselves and their families. It's a time of introspection and renewal, where the faithful turn inward even as they dance outward. But before we get too caught up in the romance and reverence, let's shine a light on the economic gears turning behind the scenes. The festival was, and still is, a boon for local economies. Textile merchants, jewelers and craftsmen see a surge in demand as people prepare for the celebrations. The market for traditional attire, especially the vibrant chaniya cholis and kediyus, booms, with prices soaring like a kite in the Navratri sky. And let's not forget the food vendors who cater to the hungry dancers with an array of delicacies that could tempt even the most disciplined faster. Yet, amidst the glitter and gaiety, there are darker shades to consider. Like any large gathering, Navratri was not immune to social tensions and controversies. The festival often highlighted the divide between the haves and the have-nots, with those unable to afford lavish costumes left to watch from the sidelines. It's the kind of irony that history loves to serve up, where a celebration of divine abundance often casts a shadow over human inequality. Then there's the gender dynamic, a double-edged sword in the Navratri narrative. While the festival offered a rare space for women to express themselves freely, it was also a stage for reinforcing traditional gender roles. The expectation for women to dress a certain way, dance a certain way, and behave a certain way was as much a part of the celebration as the music itself. It's a reminder that even the most joyous occasions carry the weight of cultural norms and expectations. So, as we twirl through the layers of Navratri, we see a tapestry woven with threads of devotion, desire, and a dash of drama. It's a festival that encapsulates the complexity of human experience, where the sacred and the secular dance side by side. And as we leave the dance floor for now, remember that this story is far from over. There's more to explore in the world of ancient festivals, where history's beats continue to resonate in ways that are both familiar and profoundly different from our own. Stay tuned, because the next chapter promises even more revelations in this grand journey through time. And just like that, we find ourselves standing at the crossroads of history and modernity, where ancient Hindu festivals, with their rich tapestries of tradition, have evolved into something both familiar and radically different. It's a bit like finding out your favorite band from the 80s is now playing arenas worldwide with a sound system that could wake the dead. But before we get too carried away with nostalgia, let's pull back the curtain on how these festivals have morphed, spread, and yes, become the economic powerhouses they are today. First up, the continuity of these ancient rituals is nothing short of impressive. Take Diwali, for instance. Once a regional affair marked by oil lamps and modest gatherings, it's now celebrated by more than 1 billion people worldwide, including sizable festivities in cities like New York, London, and Sydney. It's the kind of global reach that would make the ancient Vedic priests do a double take. But let's not sugarcoat it. The festival's current form often feels more like a blockbuster than a spiritual gathering. The fireworks, once a handful of rudimentary pyrotechnics, have become multi-million-dollar displays, with some cities spending over $100,000 on a single night's entertainment. And while the diyas still flicker, LED lights have taken over, transforming entire neighborhoods into electric wonderlands. Yet beneath this dazzling exterior lies a more sobering reality. The commercialization of Diwali has, in many ways, eclipsed its spiritual essence. The festival's economic impact in India alone is jaw-dropping, with retail sales hitting upwards of $3 billion during the festive season. It's a shopping frenzy that rivals Black Friday, with people splurging on everything from electronics to automobiles. But here's the kicker. While the economy booms, the environmental toll is staggering. The air pollution levels in cities like Delhi spike to hazardous levels, with the fine particulate matter, PM2.5, sometimes exceeding 1,000 micrograms per cubic meter, over 40 times the safe limit set by the World Health Organization. Turning our gaze to Holi, the festival has also undergone a dramatic transformation. Once a localized, organic celebration with natural dyes, it's now an international phenomenon, with Holi-themed events popping up across the globe, from Brazil to Japan. The shift from organic colors to synthetic ones has been both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, it allows for a riot of hues that last longer and cost less. On the other, these synthetic powders often contain harmful chemicals that can cause skin irritation and environmental damage. And let's not ignore the economic undercurrents. The global market for Holi colors is now worth tens of millions of dollars annually, with companies racing to cash in on the Festival of Colors craze. But while these festivals have undeniably become economic juggernauts, let's not forget their cultural and social significance, which remains as relevant as ever. Festivals like Navratri continue to serve as important cultural touchstones, offering a space for spiritual reflection and community bonding. The dance forms of Garba and Dandiya Ras have not only survived but thrived, with competitions and workshops held around the world, drawing participants from diverse backgrounds. The fusion of traditional and contemporary styles has breathed new life into these dances, ensuring they remain a vibrant part of cultural expression. Yet, as with any evolution, there are growing pains. The commercialization of these festivals often leads to a loss of authenticity, with the original meanings and practices overshadowed by the glitz and glamour. It's a delicate balancing act between preserving the sacred and embracing the modern, a challenge that communities continue to navigate. And then there's the question of accessibility. As these festivals become more commercialized, the cost of participation rises, potentially excluding those who cannot afford the increasingly extravagant celebrations. It's a classic tale of economic disparity, where the line between celebration and exclusion grows ever thinner. Despite these challenges, the enduring appeal of these festivals is undeniable. They continue to offer a glimpse into the human spirit's resilience, creativity, and capacity for joy, whether it's the flicker of a deer, the swirl of a Gerber dancer, or the splash of holly colors. These festivals remind us of our shared humanity and the timeless rhythms that connect us across cultures and continents. In the end, the story of these ancient festivals is not just one of change, but of continuity, an ever-evolving dance between past and present, tradition and innovation. As we wrap up our journey through the colorful, chaotic, and captivating world of ancient Hindu festivals, it's clear that while much has changed, the core essence remains. These celebrations continue to be a testament to the enduring power of tradition, the universality of joy, and the profound ways in which culture shapes and is shaped by the passage of time. So, as we turn off the lights and close the history books, remember that each flicker of light, each beat of the drum, each swirl of color carries with it a legacy, a story that is both ancient and ever new, echoing through the corridors of time. Vienna, a city with a name as grand as its imperial past, has an unexpected chapter in its story, the tale of a landlocked city that dared to dream of maritime glory. Yes, Vienna, nestled comfortably in the heart of Europe, is about as close to the sea as a penguin is to the Sahara. And yet, in some curious twist of ambition, it once fancied itself a player on the nautical stage. But let's not get carried away like a ship on a stormy sea. Vienna's real maritime prowess, or lack thereof, was more about navigating rivers than commanding oceans. For those of you who think Vienna might have missed Geography 101, let's set the record straight. The city is landlocked, sitting a cool 350 kilometers from the nearest coastline. That's like trying to call yourself a sailor when your nearest body of water is a bathtub. But there was something about the Danube River that got the Viennese to swap their lederhosen for captain's hats, metaphorically speaking, of course. The Danube, Europe's second longest river, was the lifeblood of Vienna's trade ambitions. Stretching over 2,850 kilometers, it flows through 10 countries, and in the days of yore, it was the medieval highway for merchants and traders. Forget the romantic notion of the high seas. The real action was on these muddy waters. Vienna sat like a well-placed toll booth on this aquatic superhighway, perfectly positioned to cash in on the constant stream of goods that floated by. Now, it's easy to get swept up in the romance of it all. Picture caravans of goods, from the exotic spices of the East to the rich textiles of Italy, all passing through Vienna's bustling docks. The city was a melting pot of cultures, a place where Persian silk met Scandinavian furs, and where you could probably listen to a dozen languages in the space of a single market square. But before we get too carried away, let's remember that river trade was more about pragmatism than poetry. Vienna's early history is all about turning limitations into opportunities. With no coastline to call their own, the Viennese didn't bother building fleets of majestic ships. Instead, they mastered the art of river navigation. They became the masters of the barge, that less than glamorous cousin of the noble ship. These flat-bottomed vessels were the workhorses of the Danube, hauling everything from timber to grain with the kind of reliability that would make a Swiss watch blush. The strategic importance of Vienna's location was not lost on its rulers. From the Babenbergs to the Habsburgs, each dynasty understood that controlling the Danube meant controlling the flow of commerce. This was economic warfare at its finest. The city's rulers levied tolls, regulated trade, and ensured that a decent cut of the profits flowed directly into their coffers. It was the medieval equivalent of setting up a lemonade stand on a busy street corner, except with a lot more politics and a lot less sugar. But let's not kid ourselves. Vienna was no Venice. There were no grand galleys or daring sea battles. The Viennese maritime ambition was more about strategic positioning and economic savvy than naval might. This wasn't a city of swashbuckling adventurers. It was a city of shrewd merchants and calculating rulers who understood that the true power lay not in the size of your fleet, but in the depth of your coffers. And yet, there is something undeniably charming about the idea of a landlocked city dreaming of the sea. It speaks to a certain audacity, a refusal to be defined by geography. Vienna's maritime aspirations remind us that sometimes the greatest voyages don't require an ocean. They just need a river, a bit of ambition, and a touch of cleverness. The Viennese might not have been the lords of the sea, but they were certainly the kings of the river, and in the end that was enough to make them a force to be reckoned with in the tangled web of medieval European trade. So as we sail into the depths of Vienna's maritime story, let's keep our eyes on the river and our expectations in check. It's a tale of currents and commerce, of ambition and adaptation. And while there may not be any pirate tales or epic sea battles, the real adventure lies in how a city without a coastline carved a place for itself in the annals of maritime history. You could say Vienna found a way to sail without the sea, an impressive feat for any city, landlocked or not. Vienna's riverine ambitions might not have launched 1,000 ships, but they certainly set the stage for a bustling trade network that could rival any seafaring city's ledger. The Danube was more than just a river. It was Vienna's economic lifeline, a ribbon of opportunity that flowed through Europe like a continental conveyor belt. The goods that traversed these waters were as varied as the merchants who traded them, from the aromatic allure of eastern spices to the sturdy practicality of Hungarian timber. And let's not forget the barrels of wine that likely fueled more than a few business decisions. Now, if you're thinking Vienna was just a picturesque backdrop for this commerce, think again. This was a city that knew how to play the game. In the 13th century, Vienna was handling an impressive volume of goods. We're talking thousands of tons moving through its docks annually, with timber and salt alone accounting for a hefty chunk of that weight. Imagine a medieval Excel spreadsheet tracking every sack of grain and bolt of cloth. Each entry a testament to Vienna's intricate dance of trade and tolls. The economic impact of this river-borne commerce was nothing short of transformative. By the 14th century, Vienna had evolved from a regional hub into a key player on the European stage. The city's coffers were swelling, and its markets were bustling with activity. The combination of strategic location and savvy governance allowed Vienna to punch well above its weight. This wasn't just about moving goods. It was about creating a nexus of economic power that drew in traders, craftsmen, and opportunists from all corners of the known world. But let's not wax poetic about the romance of trade without acknowledging the gritty realities of river navigation. If you're picturing serene journeys down the Danube with birds singing and the sun shining, think again. River travel was fraught with challenges. For starters, navigating the Danube was no leisurely cruise. It was more like a medieval version of bumper cars, with shallow waters and shifting sandbanks ready to turn a barge into an impromptu dam. And then there were the tolls. Oh, the tolls! Every few kilometers, it seemed, a toll booth emerged like a hungry troll demanding payment. Some historians suggest that a merchant could encounter up to 60 tolls on a single trip from Regensburg to the Black Sea. That's enough to make even the most patient trader consider alternate careers. And let's not forget of our tariffs. These weren't just pesky fees. They were a complex web of taxes that could make or break a merchant's profit margin. The Viennese rulers, ever the astute businessmen, knew that controlling these tariffs was akin to controlling the flow of wealth. It was a delicate balance of squeezing out revenue without driving traders to more accommodating ports. In this game of economic chess, Vienna was playing to win, and it often did. Of course, no tale of medieval trade would be complete without a nod to piracy. Yes, even the Danube had its share of river rogues. Pirates, those entrepreneurial free spirits of the waterway, added a dash of danger to the otherwise mundane business of commerce. They weren't quite the swashbuckling types you'd find in pirate movies, but they were certainly disruptive enough to keep traders on their toes. The presence of pirates highlighted a truth as old as trade itself, Where there's commerce, there's always someone looking to take a shortcut to profit. It's a reminder that while the romantic tales of merchant adventurers are fun, the reality was often far more treacherous. And yet, in the midst of these challenges, Vienna thrived. The city's resilience wasn't just about overcoming obstacles, it was about leveraging them to its advantage. In the grand tapestry of history, Vienna's riverine exploits might seem like a minor thread, but they were a critical part of the city's transformation from a provincial capital to a powerhouse of the Holy Roman Empire. This wasn't a story of grand naval conquests or epic battles on the high seas. It was a tale of strategic positioning, of turning limitations into opportunities. Vienna's maritime endeavours were less about the romance of the waves and more about the cold, hard calculations of commerce. As we delve deeper into this narrative, it's clear that Vienna's story isn't just about a city that dared to dream of the sea. It's about a place that understood the true nature of power. It wasn't about the size of your fleet or the number of sails on your horizon. It was about control, influence, and the ability to navigate the ever-shifting tides of trade and politics. Vienna might have been landlocked, but its ambitions were anything but grounded. And as we continue to explore this fascinating chapter, we'll see how those ambitions laid the groundwork for a city that would ultimately become one of Europe's great capitals. So, as we leave behind the tolls and tariffs, the pirates and the prophets, remember that Vienna's maritime story is far from over. There's still much to uncover, more myths to debunk, and plenty of history to explore. The river may have been the lifeline, but it's the people, the politics, and the relentless pursuit of prosperity that truly defined Vienna's place in the annals of trade history. Stay tuned, because the adventure is just getting started. Now, as we wade into the political stew that was medieval Vienna, let's stir in some colourful characters and their lofty ambitions that rivaled the heights of Vienna's famous Stephansdom. You see, while the Danube provided the lifeblood of commerce, it was the people in power who decided just how that blood would be pumped. And believe me, some of these folks had ideas as grand as the Habsburg palaces, but with a tad less structural integrity. Take Duke Frederick I of Austria, a man who earned the nickname the Quarrelsome. Now, if you're thinking that doesn't bode well for peaceful maritime expansion, you'd be right on the money. In the early 13th century, Frederick had grand visions of creating a maritime empire that would make Poseidon jealous. His strategy? Secure control over the Danube and, by extension, the trade routes that fed Vienna's coffers. In his mind, this would not only make Vienna the envy of all Europe, but also secure his legacy. Unfortunately, his methods were as subtle as a sledgehammer. Frederick's approach to diplomacy was akin to trying to tame a wild boar with a wooden spoon. His aggressive tactics and constant skirmishes with neighbouring regions did little to endear him to potential allies. Instead, they often left Vienna entangled in a web of conflicts that drained resources faster than you can say siege warfare. Nevertheless, his relentless pursuit of control over the Danube set a precedent for future rulers, even if it was a bit like teaching a cat to swim, ambitious, but ultimately messy. Enter the Habsburgs, that illustrious dynasty with a knack for marrying well and ruling even better. By the late 13th century, they had their sights set on expanding their influence via the Danube, picking up where Frederick's less-than-diplomatic efforts had left off. But let's not pretend this was all smooth sailing. The Habsburgs were embroiled in enough family feuds and territorial disputes to make a soap opera seem like a children's bedtime story. Rudolf I, Habsburg ruler of Austria, was the one who really got the ball rolling. Crowned in 1273, he wasn't content with just holding Vienna. He wanted to make it the beating heart of a vast network of river trade. His savvy manoeuvring and political marriages helped expand Habsburg influence, but it wasn't without its hitches. For instance, Rudolf's battles with Ottokar II of Bohemia over control of regions like Styria and Carinthia were less about family ties and more about who got to control the lucrative trade routes. It was a game of thrones with fewer dragons and more barges. Rudolf's successors continued this tradition, juggling alliances and rivalries with the skill of a court jester. The Habsburgs were nothing if not persistent. They understood that controlling the Danube was as much about politics as it was about trade. It was a chess game where every move was calculated to increase their dominion, and every piece had a role in their grand design. But let's not kid ourselves into thinking this was all about noble ambitions and strategic brilliance. Sometimes the plans of these political puppeteers went south faster than a migrating swallow. Take the ill-fated naval project of 1529, for instance, when the Viennese, in a fit of ambition, decided to bolster their river fleet to fend off the Ottomans. It was a plan fraught with more holes than a fishing net. The hastily constructed ships were about as seaworthy as a rubber duck in a hurricane, and the whole enterprise sank not just figuratively, but quite literally. The real kicker here is that amidst all these grandiose plans and political machinations, it was often the common folk who had to bear the brunt of the consequences. When taxes were raised to fund yet another military campaign or naval project, it was the merchants and peasants who felt the pinch. Yet they carried on, driven by the prospects of trade and the opportunities it brought. It's a testament to human resilience, or perhaps stubbornness, that they continued to thrive despite the power struggles swirling above them. So, what's the takeaway from all these political shenanigans? Well, it's a reminder that while the Danube was a river of opportunity, it was also a stage for human ambition and folly. The rulers of Vienna were as complex and unpredictable as the river currents they sought to control. Their stories are a mix of triumphs and tribulations, where the line between genius and madness was often as thin as a parchment. As we paddle further into Vienna's watery past, remember that the tale of its maritime ambitions is more than just a history lesson. It's a reflection of the human condition, our dreams, our failures, and our relentless pursuit of something greater. So, buckle up, because our journey through the murky waters of Vienna's political history is far from over. There are more myths to debunk, more plots to unravel, and plenty of historical currents left to navigate. Now, let's cut through the fog of legend and see what Vienna's so-called maritime legacy really looked like. Spoiler alert, it's not quite the stuff of epic ballads or blockbuster movies. But hey, don't let that spoil the fun. Myths are like historical comfort food. They're not always good for you, but they sure are satisfying. Take, for instance, the oft-repeated tale of the Great Viennese Armada. Legend has it that Vienna once deployed a formidable fleet to patrol the Danube, ready to fend off any would-be invaders with the kind of bravado usually reserved for action heroes. The reality? Well, it's less armada and more ragtag assembly. Sure, Vienna had boats, plenty of them in fact, but these were more like floating delivery trucks than battleships. Think barges and riverboats, not frigates and man-o'-wars. The fleet was about as menacing as a flock of ducks waddling down the river. So where did this myth come from? Chalk it up to a combination of civic pride and a little creative storytelling. People love a good underdog story, and the idea of a landlocked city flexing its nautical muscles is just too delicious to resist. It's a narrative that's been polished brighter than a brass button over the centuries, despite being as leaky as those riverboats in a rainstorm. Now, let's talk about the reality of Viennese mariners. Forget the romanticized image of fearless explorers braving the unknown. These folks were more like the medieval equivalent of long-haul truckers. They hauled goods up and down the Danube, day in and day out, in a routine that was as thrilling as watching paint dry. But don't dismiss their contribution just yet. These unsung heroes were the backbone of Vienna's economy, plying the river with the kind of dedication that deserves its own Medal of Honor, or at least a decent pay raise. In fact, these mariners played a crucial role in keeping Vienna supplied and prosperous. The city relied heavily on the steady flow of goods that these river routes provided: timber, grain, salt, and more. Each shipment was a lifeline that kept the city's heart beating and its coffers full. And if you think that sounds mundane, consider this. Without these goods, Vienna's rise as a major economic player in the Holy Roman Empire might have stalled faster than a barge stuck on a sandbank. But why do these myths persist when the truth is far less glamorous? Part of it is human nature. We love stories that elevate the ordinary to the extraordinary. Myths provide a sense of identity and pride, even when they stretch the truth like a pair of old lederhosen. And then there's the simple fact that history is often written by those with a flair for the dramatic. Who wouldn't prefer a tale of daring exploits over the tedious details of trade logistics? Take the example of the famous Battle of Vienna on the Danube. In some accounts, it's depicted as a grand naval conflict, with Vienna's forces heroically defending their river turf against all odds. The truth is a bit more pedestrian. Most of these skirmishes were little more than glorified border disputes, with both sides more interested in asserting toll rights than engaging in full-scale warfare. But add a dash of drama, and suddenly you've got a story that's fit for the history books. Then there's the issue of historical sources. Many of the records from the time are, shall we say, creatively embellished. Chronicles penned by monks and scribes often have the subtlety of a medieval tapestry, rich in detail but not always accurate. These accounts were as much about boosting the prestige of their patrons as they were about recording facts. Who's going to complain if the local duke is painted as a naval genius rather than a bureaucrat with delusions of grandeur? Primary sources, however, tell a different tale. Documents from the time reveal a world of meticulous trade records, tax ledgers, and river toll accounts. These are the gritty realities of commerce that don't make for riveting stories, but are essential to understanding Vienna's true maritime history. It's in these dusty archives that we find the real heroes of the story, the merchants, bureaucrats, and mariners who made Vienna's riverine trade possible. The economic context is crucial here. Vienna wasn't just dabbling in river trade for fun. It was a strategic necessity. The city's rulers understood that controlling the Danube was key to their economic survival. They didn't need a fleet of warships to do it, just a few well-placed toll stations and a knack for negotiation. It was the medieval equivalent of playing Monopoly with a strategic eye on Boardwalk and Park Place. But let's not dismiss the allure of those myths entirely. They serve as a reminder of Vienna's audacity and ambition, a landlocked city that dared to dream beyond its geographical constraints. It's a testament to the human spirit's capacity to imagine and create, even when reality insists on being a wet blanket. As we continue this journey through Vienna's maritime past, remember that history is a tapestry woven with threads of truth and fiction. The real adventure lies in untangling them, in seeing the mundane behind the myth, and appreciating the everyday heroics that often go unnoticed. Vienna's story is one of resilience and resourcefulness, a city that found its sea legs on a river and charted a course to greatness. So keep your eyes on the horizon, because this voyage is far from over. There's more history to explore, more myths to debunk, and plenty of surprises left to uncover as we sail on. As we continue down the scenic but slightly less glamorous river of Vienna's history, let's talk about the lasting legacies of its riverine escapades. You might be wondering how a city that's more familiar with schnitzels than schooners managed to leave a maritime mark on its culture and identity. Spoiler, it's a tale of transformation, adaptation, and a bit of selective storytelling. First, let's consider the obvious, trade. Vienna's economy during the medieval and early modern periods was like a well-oiled machine, powered by the steady flow of goods along the Danube. This economic engine wasn't just about lining the pockets of a few well-placed aristocrats. It fueled a broader societal transformation. By the 14th century, Vienna wasn't just trading in timber and grain. It was a hub for luxury goods like silks and spices, the medieval version of having a top-tier Amazon Prime account. This influx of wealth allowed for societal advancements, from the construction of grand architectural projects to the patronage of the arts. The city's skyline, peppered with Gothic spires and Baroque palaces, stands as a testament to this prosperity. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Vienna's strategic importance as a trade nexus also made it a prime target for conquest. The city's leaders had to balance diplomacy with defense, like jugglers trying to keep flaming torches aloft without setting their lederhosen on fire. The Ottoman sieges of the 16th and 17th centuries, particularly the infamous Siege of Vienna in 1683, were stark reminders that the Danube was both a blessing and a burden. While the river brought trade, it also carried the ambitions of those who saw Vienna as ripe for the picking. Yet, the Viennese resilience in the face of these challenges is part of what shaped the city's identity. The successful defense against the Ottomans was not just a military victory, it became a cornerstone of Viennese cultural identity, celebrated in art, music, and even pastries. Yes, that's where the croissant's ancestor makes its entrance. These events fed into a narrative of Vienna as a bulwark of European civilization, a narrative that endures in the city's cultural memory. But let's not get too caught up in the romanticism of military triumphs and trade riches. The social fabric of Vienna was also deeply influenced by its riverine endeavours. The constant flow of goods and people along the Danube turned Vienna into a melting pot of cultures long before anyone had coined that term. Merchants from across Europe and beyond brought with them not only goods, but also ideas, customs, and cuisines. This cultural exchange enriched Vienna's social tapestry, making it a city where diversity wasn't just a buzzword, but a way of life. And speaking of cultural exchanges, let's not forget the arts. Vienna's prosperity, fueled by river trade, provided the means for patronage of the arts, leading to a flourishing of music, literature, and visual arts. The city became a beacon for artists and musicians, a trend that continued well into the 18th and 19th centuries. The river might not have inspired symphonies, but it certainly helped pay for them. Now, let's tackle one of the biggest myths head-on, the idea of Vienna as a maritime power. It's a notion that's persisted, despite the geographic reality that Vienna is about as landlocked as a camel in the Alps. The reality is, Vienna never had a grand navy or a fleet of drossy vessels ready to conquer the seas. Its strength lay in its ability to control riverine trade routes and manage the economic and political networks that crisscrossed Europe. It's the equivalent of being the best chess player in a room full of checkers enthusiasts. But why does this myth persist? Part of it is undoubtedly the allure of a good story. The idea of a landlocked city dreaming of maritime glory captures the imagination. It speaks to the audacity of human ambition, the desire to transcend limitations and redefine what's possible. In a way, the myth of Vienna's maritime prowess is less about historical accuracy and more about the spirit of innovation and resilience that defines the city's legacy. However, if there's one takeaway from Vienna's watery past, it's this. The city's true power has always been in its adaptability. Vienna's rulers and citizens alike understood the importance of leveraging their unique position along the Danube. They were masters at turning challenges into opportunities, using the river as a conduit for trade, defense, and cultural exchange. This adaptability laid the groundwork for Vienna's transformation into a metropolis of global significance. So, as we wrap up our journey through Vienna's maritime history, what can we learn? Perhaps it's that history, much like a river, is a flowing narrative. It's shaped by the currents of commerce, the tides of politics, and the ripples of cultural exchange. Vienna's story is a reminder that greatness isn't always about grand conquests or dramatic exploits. Sometimes it's about understanding your strengths, navigating your limitations, and finding ways to make waves even when you're landlocked. In the end, Vienna's maritime legacy is less about the grandeur of naval fleets and more about the subtle art of influence. It's a tale of cleverness over might, of economic savvy over brute force. And while the city may not have left a mark on the high seas, it certainly carved out a place for itself in the annals of history, proving that sometimes the greatest adventures are those that happen close to home. So next time you find yourself strolling along the Danube, take a moment to appreciate the river's legacy. It's a legacy not just of trade and commerce, but of a city that dared to dream beyond its borders. Vienna may have been landlocked, but in the waters of the Danube, it found a path to prosperity, resilience, and cultural richness that continues to define it today. And that, dear listeners, is a legacy as enduring as the river itself. If you've ever wondered how the ancient Greeks went from wrestling in olive oil to crafting tragedies that put modern soap operas to shame, you're in for a treat. It all began with their not-so-humble homage to Dionysius, the god of wine, revelry, and questionable decisions. Before the spotlight hit the stage, it was all about religious rituals, and honestly, who wouldn't want to party with a deity whose main interests included grapes and good times? In the 6th century BCE, Athens wasn't just the cradle of democracy, it was also the birthplace of what we now call theatre. But before the Greeks were winning Oscars, metaphorically speaking, they were hosting massive festivals like the city Dionysia. Now, if you think modern music festivals are wild, you haven't seen anything. The city Dionysia was a week-long extravaganza that made Coachella look like a tea party. Picture this. Thousands of Athenians packed into a theatre, not to watch the latest Marvel flick, but to see who could best appease Dionysus through dramatic performances. The Athenians weren't just putting on shows for the sake of entertainment. This was serious business. The city Dionysia was an annual event held in March, timed perfectly with the arrival of spring and, let's be honest, an opportunity to shake off the winter blues. It was a time when playwrights competed for glory, with 3 tragedians, each presenting a trilogy of plays followed by a satyr play. And if you're wondering about the logistics, yes, that's a mind-boggling amount of drama squeezed into a single festival. Imagine binge-watching a season of your favorite show without the option to skip the recap. But why Dionysus, you ask? Well, the Greeks believed that this god of ecstasy and chaos was the ultimate party planner. His favor was essential for a good harvest, among other things, and what better way to get on his good side than to throw a festival in his honor? The city Dionysia started as a religious ritual, but somewhere along the line it got theatrical, quite literally. The performers, initially just a chorus singing dithyrambs, think of them as ancient Greek chants, soon found themselves telling stories, and before anyone knew it, the first actors stepped onto the stage. And let's talk about those stages. Forget plush seats and air conditioning. Theatres were massive open-air amphitheatres that could seat up to 17,000 spectators. The acoustics were so good you could hear a whisper from the back row, "Take that." Modern stadiums. The theatre of Dionysus in Athens, nestled on the slopes of the Acropolis, was the epicentre of this dramatic revolution. Here, playwrights like Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides worked their magic. These guys weren't just writing plays, they were crafting narratives that tackled everything from morality to existential dread, all while wearing masks that would make Halloween enthusiasts green with envy. The logistics of putting on a show were nothing short of Herculean. The cost of producing a play was so high that it was often funded by wealthy patrons called choregoi. These were the ancient world's equivalent of film producers, minus the red carpet. The choregoi were responsible for everything from the costumes to the chorus, which could number up to 50 performers. And if you think that's a lot of people to manage, try doing it without the help of a stage manager or a headset. Now, you might assume that ancient Greek theatre was all about highbrow art and intellectual musings. While that's partly true, the reality is that the audience could be as dramatic as the plays themselves. These were not passive spectators politely clapping at the end of a performance. If the crowd didn't like what they saw, they'd make their displeasure known loudly. Booing, hissing, and throwing things at performers were not uncommon. Talk about a tough crowd. But despite the risks, or perhaps because of them, the stakes were high. Winning the competition at the city Dionysia was a huge honor, akin to taking home an Oscar today. The winners were awarded a coveted wreath of ivy, and their names would be inscribed for posterity. For the playwrights, it was a chance at immortality, both literally and metaphorically. So there you have it. The next time you find yourself engrossed in a theatrical production, remember that it all started with a bunch of guys in togas trying to impress a god who loved a good party. The legacy of ancient Greek theatre is a testament to the enduring power of storytelling, and it all began with a festival dedicated to Dionysus. Who knew that a religious ritual could give birth to an entire art form that would influence culture for millennia? It's a classic tale of divine inspiration, human creativity, and the occasional over-the-top audience reaction. And speaking of divine inspiration and human creativity, let's pivot to the star of our ancient Greek theatre show, the amphitheatre. You see, these open-air marvels weren't just stone circles for the Greek equivalent of a TED Talk, they were masterclasses in architectural genius. Take the theatre of Epidaurus, for instance. Built in the 4th century BCE, it's famous for its acoustics so spot-on that you could hear a pin drop on stage from the highest row. And no, that's not an exaggeration. The Greeks were such perfectionists about sound that modern acousticians still study these theatres to understand how our toga-clad forebears managed to pull off such acoustic wizardry without a single microphone in sight. Now, you might think, okay, so they built some fancy theatres, big deal. But oh, it was a big deal. These venues weren't just about showcasing the latest theatrical hits. They were massive social hubs, the ancient world's answer to a multiplex cinema, a political rally, and a community gathering spot all rolled into one. Theatres like the one in Epidaurus could seat up to 14,000 people. That's a lot of Athenians packed in tighter than sardines, all there to witness the latest tragedy or comedy unfold. And unlike your last trip to a crowded stadium here, the acoustics ensured that even the guy with the worst seat in the house could hear every word the actors uttered through their masks. Ah yes, those masks. Forget subtlety, these were designed with all the flair of a modern-day drag show. Oversized and exaggerated, They made every actor look like they were trying out for a role in the most dramatic soap opera of the era. The masks weren't just about style, they were functional, allowing actors to play multiple roles and helping the audience distinguish between different characters and emotional states. And let's face it, in a theatre that size, you needed all the help you could get to convey emotion to the folks way up in the nosebleeds. But let's not forget the economic and social dynamics of putting on these productions. It was a monumental task that required a small army of performers and workers. The chorus, often numbering between 12 and 50 strong, was the backbone of the performance. These guys must have had the stamina of Olympic athletes, singing and dancing their way through hours of performance. And who paid for all of this? Enter the Corregos, the ancient equivalent of a film producer with a deep pocket and a desire for social prestige. These wealthy patrons footed the bill for everything from costumes to training the chorus, all in the hopes of gaining honor and favor in the eyes of their fellow citizens. This wasn't just charity work, it was a strategic investment. In a society where public image was everything, sponsoring a winning play at the city Dionysia was akin to planting a political flag in the hearts of your fellow Athenians. It was a chance to win the social lottery and potentially leverage that prestige into political power. So, if you ever thought modern-day politics and entertainment were intertwined, think again. The Greeks got there first, blending art and influence long before Hollywood and Capitol Hill started their tango. But let's not romanticize this too much. While the Corregos were basking in the glory of their patronage, the actors and chorus members were sweating it out under the harsh Greek sun. Acting wasn't exactly the glamorous career it is today. In fact, the actors were often slaves or metics, non-citizens who didn't have the same rights as their Athenian counterparts. Yet, they were the ones who brought the playwright's words to life, navigating the treacherous terrain of public opinion and the risk of being pelted with rotten fruit if the crowd didn't like what they heard. And then there were the playwrights themselves, those literary gladiators of the stage. They were tasked with delivering the goods, writing plays that not only entertained, but also provoked thought and discussion. They tackled themes of morality, politics, and the human condition, all under the watchful eye of an audience that could be as unforgiving as a Spartan drill sergeant. Winning at the city, Dionysia, was more than just earning a wreath. It was a chance to cement one's name in the annals of history, to be remembered long after the actors had taken their final bows. So, the next time you stroll through an amphitheatre, whether in person or in your mind's eye, remember that these weren't just stone relics of an ancient past. They were living, breathing symbols of a society that valued storytelling as both an art and a tool for social commentary. And as we continue to explore the nooks and crannies of Greek theatre, we'll uncover more tales of drama, politics, and the human spirit that echo through the ages. Stay tuned, because this saga is far from over. As we journey deeper into the heart of ancient Greek theatre, it's time to roll out the red carpet for the original celebrities of the stage, Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. These guys were the ancient world's equivalent of Spielberg, Scorsese, and Tarantino. If the city Dionysia was the Oscars, these playwrights were the ones everyone was buzzing about on the Athenian grapevine. Aeschylus, often hailed as the father of tragedy, was the trailblazer who transformed theatre from mere storytelling to a dramatic art form. Born in 525 BCE, he penned around 90 plays, with only 7 surviving the ravages of time. His masterpiece, the Oresteia, is a trilogy that takes audiences on a roller-coaster ride of murder, revenge, and justice. Think of it as the godfather of ancient Greek theatre, except instead of mafia dons, you've got vengeful gods and cursed families. Aeschylus wasn't just a one-man show, though. He famously added a second actor to the mix, creating dialogue and dramatic tension that turned his plays into dynamic spectacles. Then there's Sophocles, the golden boy of Athenian drama. Born around 497 BCE, he was the Meryl Streep of his day, winning the city Dionysia at least 18 times. His play Oedipus Rex is a masterclass in dramatic irony, where the audience is clued in to the tragic truth long before the characters catch on. Sophocles introduced the third actor, which further complicated the web of human emotion and fate on stage. And let's not forget his penchant for elaborate scenery and stage machinery. Sophocles was the kind of guy who would have loved CGI, but since that wasn't an option, he settled for mechanical cranes to hoist actors playing gods onto the stage, a technique known as deus ex machina. Lastly, we have Euripides. the controversial bad boy of Greek drama. Born in 480 BCE, he was the Quentin Tarantino of his time, challenging societal norms and poking at the underbelly of human nature. His plays like Medea and the Bacchae explored themes of madness, passion, and the divine, often with a sardonic twist that left audiences both shocked and enthralled. Euripides was notorious for his complex female characters, a move that was as daring then as it would be today in some circles. Out of his 90-plus plays, we have about 18 left, and they're still studied, performed, and endlessly debated. Now, let's debunk the myth of the solitary genius, a romantic notion that playwrights were lone wolves, scribbling away in isolation. In reality, ancient Greek drama was a collaborative affair. The playwrights worked closely with actors, shohogwa, and even the state to produce their masterpieces. Imagine trying to direct a blockbuster without CGI, relying solely on human effort and ingenuity. Each play was a team effort, with playwrights often writing parts specifically for certain actors, much like Tarantino does today. The chorus, far from being mere background noise, was integral, delivering exposition, commenting on the action, and interacting with the principal characters. The creativity didn't stop at writing, it extended to staging, music, and choreography. And let's talk about the stakes. Winning at the city Dionysia wasn't just about the glory of the moment, it was a ticket to immortality. The victorious playwright's name was etched into stone records, ensuring that their brilliance would echo through the ages. The prize? A simple laurel wreath. Yet, much like today's Oscars, it was less about the trophy and more about the prestige. Winning could make or break a career, and the competition was fierce. If you thought the film industry was cutthroat, imagine going head-to-head with Sophocles or Aeschylus in front of 17,000 spectators who wouldn't hesitate to turn into a Greek chorus of boos if displeased. The city Dionysia was more than just a theatrical showdown, it was a reflection of Athenian values. The themes explored on stage mirrored the political and social dynamics of the time. In a city-state where democracy was still finding its feet, the theatre became a platform for discussing civic issues and engaging the public in dialogue. It was their version of a town hall meeting, with a bit more flair and a lot more drama. So, the next time you find yourself lost in a gripping drama or swept away by a compelling narrative, remember that the seeds of modern storytelling were sown in the open-air theatres of Athens. The legacy of these ancient playwrights is a testament to the enduring power of collaboration and creativity. And as we continue to peel back the layers of Greek theatre, we'll uncover even more about the intersections of art, politics, and society in this fascinating period. Stay tuned, because the plot is about to thicken. And speaking of the plot thickening, let's pivot our gaze from the playwright's lofty ambitions to the real critics of ancient Greek theatre, the audience. These weren't your average polite theatre-goers, no sir. The ancient Athenian audience could rival a modern Twitter feed in its unpredictability, passion, and sheer ability to sway public opinion. Imagine sitting in the theatre of Dionysus amidst a sea of 17,000 spectators, each with their own vociferous take on the latest tragedy or comedy unfolding before them. First off, let's talk seating arrangements, because where you sat was a pretty big deal. The theatre wasn't a free-for-all, it was a microcosm of Athenian society, stratified and structured to reflect the social ladder. The front rows, known as the proadria, were reserved for the VIPs of the day priests, magistrates, and other high-ranking officials. Think of it as the equivalent of the best box seats at the Super Bowl, only instead of nachos and beer, you were more likely to munch on figs and wine. Behind these prime seats sat the demes, or the common folk. These were the regular citizens of Athens who made up the Athenian democracy. Their presence was crucial, not just for filling seats, but for engaging in the civic duty of evaluating the performances, much like voters at a political rally. The audience's reactions could make or break a play, and playwrights knew it. The stakes were high, and the crowd could be merciless. A play that flopped might see its playwright's career nosedive faster than a stock market crash. Now, here's where things get interesting. The role of women and slaves. While women were generally expected to stay out of the public eye, particularly in political arenas, the theatre was a different story. They could attend performances, but their seats were usually in the back, akin to the nosebleed section at a concert. The same went for slaves, who also found themselves at the outer edges of the theatre. Yet, Despite their relegated positions, their reactions were part of the collective chorus, echoing across the amphitheatre, contributing to the cacophony of approval or disdain. The real kicker? Sometimes, the audience's reactions were as dramatic as the plays themselves. We're talking spontaneous applause, erupting like a pop concert, or, on the flip side, booing that could make even the stoutest playwright's blood run cold. And if the performance was truly abysmal, it wasn't unheard of for the crowd to get a little, let's say, interactive. Imagine a sea of disgruntled Athenians hurling olives or figs at the stage, a gesture as poignant as a modern-day Twitter roast, but with more vitamin C. Theatre in ancient Athens wasn't just about entertainment, it was a mirror reflecting societal values, politics, and democracy itself. The plays often tackled contemporary issues, with themes ranging from justice to tyranny, providing a platform for public discourse. In a way, the theatre was the ancient equivalent of today's op-ed pages, where controversial topics were laid bare for communal examination and debate. This wasn't passive consumption, it was active engagement with the issues of the day. But let's not put too much gloss on the democratic sheen. While the theatre was a hub for civic engagement, it was also a bastion of the status quo. The seating hierarchy reinforced social divisions, and the narratives often reflected the dominant patriarchal and classist values of the time. Women and slaves may have been present, but the plays were written by and for the male citizenry. It was a world where power dynamics were as much a part of the spectacle as the plays themselves. Despite this, the theatre's role as a megaphone for democracy was undeniable. It provided a space where the collective voice of Athens could be heard, where ideas could be challenged, and where societal norms could be questioned. It was a place where the arts and politics intersected, creating a dynamic and often volatile arena for public discourse. So, the next time you find yourself at a theatre, remember that those plush seats and polite applause are a far cry from the tumultuous and vibrant world of ancient Greek theatre. It was a place where drama unfolded, both on and off the stage, where the audience held as much power as the playwrights, and where the collective voice of a city-state could echo through the ages. As we continue to delve into this captivating world, we'll uncover even more about the intricate dance between art, society, and politics in ancient Greece. The story is far from over, and the best is yet to come. And as we tie up the toga on our journey through ancient Greek theatre, let's face a truth as timeless as the plays themselves. Storytelling is like a hydra, constantly sprouting new heads in the form of sequels, spin-offs, and reboots. The Greeks might not have had box sets, but they were the original purveyors of the binge-watch, albeit with trilogies instead of streaming platforms. Fast forward a few millennia, and the seeds sown in the amphitheatres of Athens have blossomed into the sprawling cinematic universes and serialized dramas of today. If Sophocles could see how we devour entire seasons in a single weekend, he probably raised one of those iconic eyebrows carved onto his theatrical masks. And what would Aeschylus think of superhero franchises? In a way, his gods and heroes were the original Avengers, battling it out on stage with all the drama of a cosmic soap opera. The Greeks set the stage, quite literally, for the narrative frameworks we still cherish. They gave us the hero's journey, tragic flaws, and the cathartic release of seeing someone else's life go off the rails, because let's be honest, nothing makes you feel better about your own bad day than watching Oedipus's familial fiasco. But before we get too misty-eyed about ancient theatre, let's peel back the layers of romanticism like an onion of historical reality. Sure, the Greeks gifted us with cultural treasures, but they also dealt with more drama backstage than on it. Forget the glamorized image of theatre as an artistic utopia. The truth? It was as gritty as a Spartan training regimen. For starters, the economic engine behind these productions was as complex as the themes they explored. The wealthy choirgoi who bankrolled the plays weren't just patrons of the arts, they were status seekers with a penchant for flexing their financial muscles. And while they might have been the Jeff Bezoses of their time, funding everything from costumes to chorus choreography, the actors were, more often than not, at the bottom of the social ladder. Many were slaves or non-citizens, performing not for glory but survival, their fate tied to the whims of the audience and the success of the play. And let's not forget the logistics. Imagine trying to coordinate a cast of dozens, a chorus of 50, and a backstage crew with nothing but papyrus scrolls and shouted instructions. The Corregos might have had money to spare, but they didn't have the luxury of modern production technology. No CGI, no lighting rigs, no sound systems, just raw human talent and ingenuity. Then there's the social context. While the theatre was a democratic space where ideas could be aired and debated, it was still a reflection of the hierarchical society from which it sprang. Women had limited roles both on and off the stage, and while they could attend performances, their voices were a whisper compared to the roar of male citizens. Slaves and metics, though present, were relegated to the margins, both literally and figuratively. Yet despite these gritty realities, the legacy of Greek theatre is nothing short of monumental. It wasn't just about entertainment, it was a cultural crucible where ideas, politics, and human emotion were forged into stories that would echo through the ages. The themes they explored, power, fate, morality, are as relevant today as they were back then. Every time we delve into a political drama or get swept away by an epic tale of heroism, we're tapping into the same wellspring that nourished the ancient Greeks. So, as we wrap up our odyssey through the world of ancient Greek theatre, let's toast to its enduring impact. Sure, the realities behind the curtain were harsh, and the glamour was often more myth than reality, but the stories they told and the innovations they pioneered continue to shape the narratives we hold dear. In the end, the theatre was a microcosm of human experience, capturing the grandeur and the grit in equal measure. And as long as we have stories to tell, the spirit of those ancient amphitheatres will live on, reminding us that even in the most chaotic of times, a good tale can light the way. So grab your popcorn, cue up your favourite series, and enjoy the show, because, in the grand scheme of things, we're all just actors on the same ancient stage. In the bustling chaos of ancient Greece, where city-states were as common as reality TV shows today, a new alliance was born. The year was 478 BCE, and the Persians had just been booted from the Greek mainland like an unwelcome guest overstaying their welcome. Enter the Delian League, a coalition of Greek city-states that was supposed to be the ancient equivalent of the Avengers. But unlike the Avengers, this team-up didn't have a snazzy headquarters in New York. Its treasury was parked on the island of Delos, a place known for its sacredness and its lack of luxury villas. Now, let's talk about the players in this ancient drama. Athens was the star quarterback, the Tony Stark of the group, while Sparta, perhaps the most famous jock of the bunch, decided to sit this one out. Apparently, they had other pressing matters like perfecting their six-pack abs and military drills. Without Sparta's cool kids at the table, Athens took the opportunity to step up and run the show. And oh boy, did they ever run it. This was supposed to be a coalition, but it started looking more like a one-man band pretty quickly. The League's main gig was to keep Persia from crashing their party again. They'd had enough of Persia's antics. Like that time King Xerxes tried to invade with a horde so vast, it was like trying to fit an elephant into a Mini Cooper. So, the League's initial mission was to protect the Aegean Sea and liberate Greek cities under Persian control. Think of it as a massive seafaring neighbourhood watch, but with more triremes and fewer awkward potlucks. Now, the treasury on Delos was more than just a pile of drachmas. It was the glue holding this alliance together, the financial heart of the operation. Every city-state chipped in cash or ships, and Athens, being the ambitious city-state it was, volunteered to manage the funds. You can probably guess where this is going. Put a stack of cash in front of a power-hungry city and watch the drama unfold. It's like giving a teenager the keys to a sports car. Exciting at first, but you know a crash is coming. In the early days, the League had a certain idealism about it. City-states joined hands, figuratively of course. Social distancing was the norm even then in a rare moment of unity. It was a time when Athenians, Corinthians, and all the other Aeons genuinely believed they could create a safer world. The myth of Greek unity is appealing, isn't it? Like all good myths, though, it glosses over the messier bits, like the fact that Athens was already eyeing the captain's chair, ready to steer the League according to its own interests. Athens's influence grew faster than you could say democracy, and the signs of power imbalance were as clear as the Aegean Sea. They were already calling the shots on military campaigns and collecting those oh-so-important contributions. The League was meant to be egalitarian, but it quickly became apparent that Athens was less about one for all and more about all for one, with Athens being that one. Despite the initial excitement, not everyone was thrilled about Athens's growing dominance. Some city-states started to grumble, much like how one might complain about a monopolistic tech company today. Yet, the fear of Persian resurgence kept them in line, at least for now. They needed Athens's naval power, and Athens was more than happy to provide it for a price. In these early days, the Delian League was a fascinating mix of cooperation and competition, idealism and realpolitik. It was a time when the allure of a common cause masked the underlying tensions. But beneath the surface, Athens was already setting the stage for its own empire-building ambitions. The League was supposed to be about shared security, but with Athens at the helm, it looked increasingly like a Game of Thrones. And in this game, Athens was playing to win. With Athens at the helm, the Delian League was starting to look less like a noble alliance and more like an episode of ancient Greece's Got Talent, where the judges were clearly biased. By 454 BCE, the cash flow from the League's members was as predictable as a soap opera plot twist. Tribute payments became the lifeblood of this burgeoning Athenian empire, filling its coffers faster than you could say theatre tickets. And let's be honest, Athens loved its theatre, both the dramatic and the political kind. Here's the lowdown. City-states paid tribute in the form of money or ships, theoretically for mutual defense against Persia. But the math was sketchy at best. The tribute system was essentially Athens's way of saying, "Hey, nice city-state you got there. It'd be a shame if something happened to it." This wasn't your average neighborhood watch. It was more like a protection racket with a democratic flair. The Persians were the common enemy, sure, but Athens was the one holding the purse strings, and they weren't shy about tugging them. So, how much are we talking about? In cold, hard drachmas, the annual tribute collected from the League's members was a staggering 460 talents. That's around $12 million in today's cash register sounds. Picture a line of Athenian tax collectors, each with the subtlety of a marching band, making their rounds to city-states who were beginning to feel they were paying more for a service they didn't quite sign up for. But hey, who could put a price on peace of mind, right? Now let's talk about the treasury's infamous move from Delos to Athens in 454 BCE. Officially, the Athenians claimed it was for security reasons. Delos was just too vulnerable, they said. But if you believe that, I've got a bridge in Babylon to sell you. The real security concern was Athens wanting to secure its grip over the League's finances, ensuring that every drachma was just a stone's throw from the Parthenon. As for those persuasive tactics Athens used, let's just say they weren't exactly relying on a charming sales pitch. When city-states started grumbling about their hefty tribute fees, Athens would remind them of the naval support they provided, usually with a fleet of triremes parked threateningly close to their harbours. Athens was like that gym membership you can't cancel, difficult to escape and constantly increasing in cost. Once you were in, getting out required more than a strongly worded letter. The economic impact on Athens was like a steroid shot to its economy. It funded everything from the construction of the Acropolis to the salaries of public officials and the expansion of its naval fleet. The Athenian agora was bustling with activity, merchants trading goods from across the Mediterranean, all under the watchful eyes of Athenian overseers. Athens was booming, its skyline dotted with cranes, not the bird kind, mind you, but the construction cranes of ancient Greece, lifting stones and statues into place. Meanwhile, the rest of the League's members started noticing that their contributions weren't just protecting them from Persia, they were bankrolling Athenian glory. It was as if Athens had found a way to turn their collective anxiety into golden opportunities for themselves. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, least of all the Athenians, who were more than happy to bask in their newfound prosperity. While Athens was busy turning itself into the Disneyland of the ancient world, the city-states' allies were beginning to feel more like subjects than partners. The myth of a unified Greek world was starting to crack, revealing the harsh truth beneath. Athens was less about team spirit and more about empire building. And yet, the allure of Greek unity remained a powerful narrative, much like a blockbuster movie with a predictable plot but irresistible special effects. All this led to a situation ripe with tension. The Delian League was supposed to be a coalition of equals, but by mid-5th century BCE it was clear that Athens wasn't interested in sharing the spotlight. Their grip on the League tightened, and the rest of the Greek city-states found themselves in a delicate dance, one that involved navigating the Athenian dominance while keeping an eye on the Persian threat. In the grand theatre of ancient Greece, the Delian League was becoming less of a partnership and more of a one-man show. Athens, the self-appointed director, was calling the shots and writing the script. The rest of the cast? Well, they were starting to realize that their roles were more supporting than starring, and they were stuck in a play that was increasingly hard to exit. But as any good dramatist knows, the plot was thickening and the final act was still to come. But as any good dramatist knows, the plot was thickening and the final act was still to come. Athens, flexing its newfound muscles, had turned the Delian League into a personal empire faster than you can say power trip. The city-state was playing the long game, but its allies were about to crash the party with some unscripted drama. Enter Naxos, the first city-state to say no thanks to Athens's overbearing direction. Around 470 BCE, Naxos decided it had had enough of Athens's heavy-handedness and tried to exit the league. Spoiler alert, Athens wasn't handing out participation trophies for attempted secession. Instead of a polite farewell, Athens responded with a military smackdown, sending a clear message: you can check out any time you like, but you can never leave. Naxos was forcibly brought back into the fold, its walls torn down and fleet confiscated. Athenian democracy, it seemed, was more about my way or the trireme way. Next on the rebellious roster was Thasos in 465 BCE, which dared to challenge Athens's dominance over valuable gold mines and trade routes. Thasos tried to stage its own exit, possibly inspired by Naxos's ill-fated attempt, but Athens wasn't about to let a lucrative source of revenue slip through its fingers. The Athenian response was swift and brutal, laying siege to Thasos for 2 years. When the dust settled, Thasos found itself stripped of its defences and mines and forced to pay tribute like an overcharged gym member. Athens was sending a not-so-subtle memo: dissenters would not be tolerated. Rebellions like those of Naxos and Thasos were the ancient equivalent of unfriending Athens on social media, only to find out that Athens owned the platform. The message was clear. Joining the Delian League was less like being part of a book club and more like signing a lifetime contract with no opt-out clause. The idea of freedom, so often brandished by Athens, was looking more like a clever marketing slogan than an actionable policy. Athens, master of the spin, was adept at selling its actions as noble endeavours. Their rhetoric was all about protecting the Greek world from the Persian menace, but the reality was more: join us or else. They painted their empire building as a mission of liberation, but the city-states under their thumb might have described it differently. If they weren't under threat of Athenian diplomacy, that is. Now, let's talk about the PR machine Athens had running. They were like the original spin doctors, crafting stories about unity and freedom while their actions screamed conquest. Athens would deliver rousing speeches extolling the virtues of democracy and collective security, though their version of collective was more like a dictatorship with better branding. They spun tales of Greek solidarity, casting themselves as the benevolent protectors of the Hellenic world. But beneath the surface, their actions were more mafia boss than magnanimous ally. The original mission of the Delian League, to protect against Persian aggression, was becoming a distant memory, like a New Year's resolution by February. The League was supposed to be a coalition of equals, pooling resources for the greater good. But as Athens tightened its grip, the mission morphed into something far less altruistic. The city-state was building an empire under the guise of a defensive alliance, and they weren't shy about using force to maintain it. The economic implications were staggering. With the tribute money rolling in, Athens was funding monumental projects like the construction of the Parthenon, while other city-states struggled under the weight of their financial obligations. The stark contrast between the opulence of Athens and the financial strain on its so-called allies was as clear as an Attic summer sky. The League's treasury, once a symbol of collective strength, had become a piggy bank for Athenian grandeur. In the meantime, Athens's foreign policy was as smooth as a politician's promise. They justified their heavy-handed tactics with the ever-present spectre of Persian invasion, conveniently ignoring the fact that the real threat to Greek freedom was now coming from within. The Athenian Empire was like a game of musical chairs, where Athens always kept the last seat for itself, and everyone else was left standing. The Delian League's transformation was a masterclass in realpolitik. Athens was walking a tightrope between maintaining the facade of a defensive alliance and pursuing its imperial ambitions. The city-state had mastered the art of saying one thing and doing another, a skill that has stood the test of time. The rest of the Greek world watched as the League's original mission slipped away, overshadowed by Athenian ambition and the harsh reality of power politics. As this drama unfolded, it wasn't just about who held the power, but what they did with it. Athens was reshaping the political landscape of the Aegean, and the city-states under its influence were caught in a web of alliances, obligations, and coercion. The Delian League, once a beacon of hope against the Persian threat, was now a cautionary tale of how power can corrupt even the most noble of intentions. So, what did all this mean for the Greek world? It meant that the concept of unity was as fragile as a Spartan wine cup at a symposium, and that the allure of empire was too tempting for Athens to resist. The League's members were faced with a grim choice: accept Athenian dominance or face the consequences. And as history rolled on, this tension would only intensify, setting the stage for even greater conflicts to come. Athens's empire building was a double-edged sword, offering protection and prosperity to some while subjugating others. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on anyone, least of all the Athenians themselves. They were creating a legacy, but whether it would be one of glory or infamy was still up in the air. As the Delian League continued its transformation, the echoes of its original mission grew fainter, overshadowed by the drumbeat of Athenian ambition and the relentless march of history. As Athens continued its imperial ascent, the city-state wasn't just building an empire, it was constructing a cultural juggernaut that would leave an indelible mark on human history. Sure, they were strong-arming their allies into submission, but they were also creating a renaissance of art and architecture that was less about diplomacy and more about showing off. It's as if Athens decided to throw the world's largest block party, but only they got to pick the playlist. Take the Parthenon, for example. Built between 447 and 432 BCE, this architectural marvel was funded by the Delian League's tribute, a sort of ancient Kickstarter campaign, if you will, but without the backers' consent. Perched atop the Acropolis, the Parthenon was a temple dedicated to Athena, the patron goddess of Athens, and it was as much a statement of religious devotion as it was a flex of Athenian power. It was like Athens was saying, "Look what we can do with your money," a sentiment that likely didn't sit well with the League's members who were footing the bill. Speaking of bills, let's talk numbers. The construction of the Parthenon cost around 469 talents, a sum that would make even the most lavish modern art installations blush. To put that into perspective, that's about $12.3 million today, enough to buy a small island or a decent-sized yacht. But for Athens, it was a small price to pay for immortality, and they spared no expense in making sure the temple was dripping with opulence. The Parthenon wasn't just a building, it was a symbol of Athenian ingenuity and artistic prowess. Designed by architects Iktinos and Callicrates, and adorned with sculptures by the legendary Phidias, the temple was the epitome of Doric grandeur. But let's not forget the irony here. While Athens was busy gilding its temples with gold and ivory, the city-states contributing to this grand project were struggling under the weight of their own tributes. The cultural renaissance Athens was experiencing didn't exactly trickle down to the allies, who were more concerned with paying their dues than paying their respects to Athena. Culturally, Athens was on fire, metaphorically speaking, of course. The city was a hub of intellectual and artistic activity, attracting thinkers like Socrates and dramatists like Sophocles. The arts flourished in a way that made Athens the envy of the ancient world. While their allies were busy grumbling about their forced contributions, Athenians were attending plays at the theatre of Dionysius, debating philosophy in the agora, and admiring the latest works of art. It was a veritable cultural buffet, but only Athenians and those they deemed worthy got a seat at the table. Now, if you were a member of the Delian League, you might have felt like an extra in this grand Athenian blockbuster. Sure, you were part of the scene, but you weren't exactly getting top billing. The cultural achievements of Athens were undeniably impressive, yet they stood in stark contrast to the political reality of the League. Athens's democracy at home was vibrant, with citizens actively participating in decision-making. But their management of the League was anything but democratic. It was autocratic, to put it kindly. Athens was more like a diva demanding the spotlight, leaving the rest of the city-states to play supporting roles whether they liked it or not. Let's bring in Thucydides, the ancient historian who didn't shy away from calling it like he saw it. He documented the growing resentment among Athens's allies, who were starting to realize that their contributions were less about mutual defense and more about Athenian aggrandizement. Thucydides wasn't just recording history, he was offering a front-row seat to the unfolding drama. He noted the irony of Athens preaching democracy while practicing something quite different within the League. A tale as old as time, where the allure of power overshadowed the democratic ideals Athens claimed to uphold. The resentment from the League's allies was simmering, much like a pot left unattended on a stove. City-states like Samos and Byzantium began to question their roles in this so-called alliance, and Athens's response was predictably heavy-handed. They used their military might to stamp out dissent, ensuring that their cultural achievements were built on the backs of their reluctant partners. It was a classic case of do as I say, not as I do, where Athens's democratic ideals were neatly compartmentalized, reserved for the home front, but not extended to their allies. Economically, Athens was thriving. The tribute money was a lifeline that allowed them to fund not only grandiose building projects but also public festivals, the navy, and the salaries of public officials. The Athenian economy was buzzing like a well-oiled machine, and everyone wanted a piece of the action. Meanwhile, the other League members were left to wonder why their shared security felt more like an Athenian shopping spree. In this grand tapestry of power, art, and politics, Athens was weaving a complex narrative, one where they were both the hero and the antagonist. They were creating a legacy, but at a cost that would eventually prove unsustainable. The cultural renaissance they spearheaded left a lasting mark on history, but it did so at the expense of their so-called partners. As the tension within the League continued to build, Athens was setting the stage for a dramatic climax that would redefine the Greek world. As we pause here, Athens's empire seems unstoppable. Yet, beneath the surface, the cracks are beginning to show. For now, the city-state remains the shining star of the Greek world, but in the background, the murmur of discontent is growing louder. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into this historical saga, where Athens's ambitions are about to face their greatest challenges yet. Amidst all the grandeur and cultural fireworks of Athens, you'd almost forget that a geopolitical volcano was simmering beneath the surface, ready to blow. And blow it did, in the form of the Peloponnesian War, a conflict that would eventually spell doom for the Athenian Empire and shake the Greek world to its roots. The year was 431 BCE, and the stage was set for a showdown that would make any soap opera writer green with envy. If you thought the Greek city-states had gone their separate ways after the Persian Wars, think again. The rivalry between Athens and Sparta was like a never-ending sibling feud, with the Peloponnesian League, led by Sparta, now itching to put Athens in its place. Spartan patience, already thinner than a Spartan's waistline, snapped like a twig under the weight of Athenian arrogance and imperial overreach. Athens, basking in the glory of its cultural renaissance, had become the ancient equivalent of an influencer who forgot where they came from, and Sparta was all too happy to remind them. The war was a marathon, not a sprint, spanning 27 grueling years. It was a clash of titans, each city-state flexing its military muscles, with Athens boasting naval supremacy and Sparta dominating on land. You could say it was a classic case of rock, paper, scissors, but with more bloodshed and fewer happy endings. The conflict stretched from 431 to 444 BCE, a timeline that saw fortunes rise and fall faster than you could say democracy. Let's talk numbers, because the Peloponnesian War wasn't just a clash of ideologies, it was a costly affair. Athens, flexing its financial muscles with tribute money, poured resources into its navy, maintaining a fleet of around 300 triremes. These sleek warships were the pride of Athens, each costing a hefty 1 talent per month to maintain, or roughly 28,000 in today's currency. Multiply that by 300, and you've got a budget that could make even the most extravagant modern-day defense contractors blush. But money can't buy loyalty, and Athens learned this the hard way. Their allies, or, more accurately, their subjects, were growing increasingly resentful. The tribute system, once a necessary evil to fend off Persia, now felt more like a shakedown. City-states like Corcyra and Pylos found themselves caught in the crossfire, their allegiances swaying like a pendulum between Athens and Sparta, depending on who was offering the better deal or wielding the bigger stick. Athens was riding high on its cultural achievements, but the political situation was spiraling out of control. The infamous Sicilian expedition of 45 BCE was a classic case of overreach, a disastrous military campaign that saw Athens attempt to conquer Sicily over 800 miles away. It was a logistical nightmare from the get-go, akin to trying to invade Mars with a budget airline. The operation ended in catastrophe, with the loss of 200 triremes and thousands of Athenian soldiers, marking a turning point in the war and signalling the beginning of the end for Athens. The irony of Athens, the self-proclaimed champion of democracy, falling victim to its imperial ambitions, wasn't lost on anyone. The city-state had gone from liberator to oppressor, and its allies were no longer buying the rhetoric of unity and freedom. The Delian League's noble beginnings, where city-states had joined forces to combat a common enemy, had devolved into an empire held together by coercion and fear. As the war dragged on, economic strains began to take their toll. The Athenian treasury, once overflowing with tribute money, was running dry. The cost of maintaining a vast navy and funding prolonged military campaigns was unsustainable, and Athens found itself scraping the bottom of the barrel. By 404 BCE, Athens was a shadow of its former self, its fleet decimated, its walls breached by Spartan forces, and its citizens facing the harsh reality of defeat. The fall of Athens was a sobering conclusion to the saga of the Delian League, a cautionary tale of how power corrupts, and even the greatest intentions can go awry. The city's ambitions, once a beacon of hope and progress, had become its Achilles' heel. The democratic ideals Athens had championed were overshadowed by the harsh realities of empire building, where the promise of freedom was often a mirage. Reflecting on this historical roller coaster, it's hard not to see the parallels with modern history. The names and faces may change, but the story remains the same. The allure of power, the temptation of expansion, and the inevitable downfall that follows hubris. Athens, for all its brilliance and innovation, became a victim of its success, a reminder that even the most enlightened societies are not immune to the corrupting influence of power. And there you have it, folks, a saga of ambition, power, and downfall that rivals any epic tale. The Delian League, once a symbol of Greek unity, became a monument to Athenian overreach, a cautionary tale etched into the annals of history. As we wrap up this journey through ancient Greece, let's take a moment to ponder the lessons left behind, that history, much like a Greek tragedy, has a way of repeating itself, with new actors stepping into old roles, each convinced they'll be the exception. So, what's the takeaway? That power, unchecked and unbalanced, is a recipe for disaster. That even the noblest of intentions can lead to unintended consequences. And perhaps most importantly, that the stories of the past are more than just tales of long-dead heroes. They're mirrors reflecting our own world, reminding us that the more things change, the more they stay the same.